Greetings, one and all, and welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club Jamboree with my friends Rob and Jack, and more to follow, no doubt, as per usual. In fact, I have reason to suspect we might have a few surprise visitors tonight, but we shall see. Anyway, right. So I don't know where you want to start. So I'm just going to pretend that I'm not the guy who's going to start, and I'm not going to start. I'm actually not going to start. Y'all start. How's the non-smoking going, Rob?
It's going well, actually. I am one day away from 3 Scaramucci's.
Three scaramucci's.
I love it. So, are you familiar with a smoot as a measurement of distance?
No. How far is a smoot?
Well, a smoot, I believe, is 6 foot 1.5 inches, and a smoot is named after a guy whose last name was Smoot, who went to MIT in the 1940s, I want to say, and as a college prank. MIT students used smoot to measure all the bridges in Massachusetts. And so the smoot became a unit of measurement. And every year, the MIT students go out and they repaint the smoot markings across the bridges to make sure that the tradition is maintained. So anyway, we've got smoots and we've got scaramucci's.
Yeah, I mean, do you guys know how long a Scaramucci is, right?
I don't
It's like
actually.
9 days or 8 days.
11 days.
11 days.
There's
Okay, right.
11 days. So tomorrow is 3 Scaramucci's that I've haven't smoked. So
Good for you. Good evening, Michael. How you doing?
Good evening.
I'm trying to figure out what your name tag is a reference to.
baby got back.
Sorry, the internet dropped out, so I didn't actually hear the answer.
Baby got back.
Oh, that's right. Of course. How's it going, Michael?
Everything's fine. I just had to make a run for some pharmacy stuff and some shrimp cocktail for Misty. She had some dental work done, so that's what she wanted. So I had to speed on over there, get that, and then hurry back to my chair.
Well, I'm glad you all are here anyway. So, I suppose start off with the most obvious. The Supreme Court has twice rejected Trump's attempt at a coup. So, and Rudy Giuliani has the temerity, audacity, pick your adjective, to say, hey, we're not done. January 6th, Congress votes to certify or accept the results of the Electoral College and blah, blah, blah. And then I was reminded in my little noggin here of Michael Moore's movie Fahrenheit 9/11, where he was talking about when Al Gore was basically cheated out of the election, and then he had to be the guy as vice president. He's also president of the Senate, and he had to be the guy who presided over the certification process. And there was a whole bunch of representatives from the House, and they needed one senator to sign on with them to just to halt the proceeding and to start some kind of investigation. And they couldn't get one senator to do it because everybody was like, no, Supreme Court spoke, the process is done, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these fuckers, there's 126 of them who signed this goddamn letter. At least one of them is going to say, I got a senator, right? So they're not done. And that's terrifying.
I mean, I still have some trust that the the inertia of our system kind of still has enough sway. Not that the system works, but that the system is a train that really has difficult time turning, and it is an effort to turn that train when it's got to actually jump the tracks in order to do it. And that's sort of my only hope in terms of how successful this, attempt is going to be. But you're right, it is. It's very disquieting.
My immediate gut reaction to that is that Americans are not going to like 3 times in their lifetime the popular vote not being heard. And I would be afraid to be the guy that stole this election, you know? And I know that people made a lot of like Barack Obama being black and being the president, like they'd say he should be afraid of being assassinated. But stealing an election and weaseling it out like that, it's going to cause a lot of radical stuff to happen. And we've seen things get so hot this year. You know, police departments burning down.
I think
The
that,
biggest riots we've ever seen. What could that bring with it?
well, there's a flip side to that, which is that most of Trump's base believes that the election was stolen by Biden. And so that's the side that tends toward violence. I mean, if anybody starts sort of a shooting war, it's almost certainly going to be the extreme right wing and not the left. In terms of who is going to go around threatening,
You're muted.
Oops. Who are they going to shoot at?
well, that's the concern I have, is that they're going to go after, Democratic senators, certainly, the governor of Michigan, and various other people who they've already sort of
Here's
targeted.
here's what's great. If you pay attention to the Trump supporters that are currently like in the streets and upset and in the Twitter sphere ranting and raving, they're mad at the GOP. They are vowing to burn down the Republican Party. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
Well, okay. I mean, I understand. I understand the you're being facetious mostly because I mean, without a two-party system, we're fucked. I mean, we need at least two parties. More would be even better. If we had a plethora of viable parties that had to form coalitions, I think that would be.
But there is another party. But that's the thing is their party, the Trump party, in their minds will replace the Republican, just like the Republicans replaced the Whigs. Um, the Trump party will replace the Republicans or the GOP. But yeah, I mean, they are angry at the GOP and they are looking for the GOP to be destroyed. Um,
and they're
they're
also
even not even a joke. They are like literally saying they are going to boycott the runoff in Georgia, which is like, I mean, that's. I don't even need to tell you how stupid that is.
well, the reason being is because they're not even making any pretense of it being democratic. They don't want Trump as president. They want, like, I'm seeing very literal calls for Trump to be anointed as, king of America, or regent or something like that. And I've seen that, really frequently, surprisingly frequently on Twitter.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the brain power that it takes, right? To apparently ignore the fact that if the Republicans don't win the runoffs in Georgia, the party that these people belong to will have no power at all in government anymore. They don't have the House, they don't have the presidency, and that'll give away the Senate. So,
Right, but they're not looking for political power at this point. I mean, these folks are suggesting something that is very different. They're talking about kind of a literal coup where Trump takes power in a totally non-democratic way without any of the rules and strictures of democracy, in order to have sort of the, God emperor that they've been memeing about.
Well, I mean, there's two people who've worn the uniform of the United States here with us. Jack, are you a veteran as well, just out of curiosity? No, okay, fair enough. But these two are, and I'm wondering how that game makes you guys feel. I mean, generally, just as a fact of, they give you this whole spiel, and we've been raised our whole lives, that the uniform means something. America stands for something, and that something is being burned before our very eyes. Or am I overreacting because of my bias?
That something has been burned before our eyes for the last several decades. I mean, that's number one. Number two is Trump and his fans. The thing that they want to see happen, the thing that they would like to see happen, the kind of coup that Jack is talking about that they're looking for, isn't possible. Nor would it have any military support. I mean, you're talking like in order to have any kind of military backing for what they would want to do, they would need to have political power. And that's what we were just going
You
to
have to
say.
do things like change the Secretary of Defense and change all the top people in the Department of Defense. You mean things like that? Because he's been doing.
But the Joint Chiefs, Trump doesn't have the Joint Chiefs.
Sure.
I mean, and even the people that he puts into positions that he thinks are all his. Well, I mean, the Supreme Court just proved that don't mean shit.
Mm.
He puts these people into positions thinking, when it comes time to lick my knob, they will. No, they won't, because once they're in the position, they don't need you anymore. You gave them what they wanted. They wanted the seat. They got it. Fuck you.
Well, that's right. Actually, when you're in the Supreme Court, you're more powerful than the president in many, many very real, tangible ways. And you don't have to take anywhere near as much shit as the president does, which is, probably why it would be better to be a Supreme Court justice if you had the choice. What I want to say is it comes back to what I asked Jack before, that, when it comes to the boogaloo or whatever, if there's some sort of civil unrest, some sort of civil insurrection, as it were, who the fuck are these people supposed to be aiming their guns at? The police? The army? I mean, who are they
Well,
going to be?
I don't know if you saw, but the leader of the Proud Boys was invited to the White House sort of secretly, and he posted about it on Parler. He first posted that he'd gotten an invitation for a secret meeting in an undisclosed location, and then he shows a picture of the White House portico, and then the next follow-up, I don't know what you call it on Parler, their version of a tweet is like, I never thought I'd be here.
I think you call it a poop, but I could be wrong.
Apparently, he was just on a tour. The White House says that there was no invitation to him. He wasn't there by anybody's invite. He was part of a White House tour that anybody could have been a part of. He's just trying to. Yeah, no, he's just trying to peddle some kind of faux influence.
Possibly, I mean, it could be true, or he could be trolling. Either way, it's problematic.
Yeah. Would you put it above Trump at this point to actually literally invite, the leader of the Proud Boys?
I don't think
it doesn't seem outside.
At this point, I can't imagine him inviting anybody in for any reason. I can't imagine him doing anything. I mean, he couldn't stay for a ceremony where he's bestowing a medal on somebody. He couldn't even stay long enough for that. This guy is so broken. He ain't got time to think about inviting somebody to come to the White House. He just wants to sulk. He's probably, right now, pulling a Nixon, and he's yelling at pictures. He's yelling at paintings.
So I wouldn't be surprised if January 21st, after the football has changed hands, that all of his cabinet and even the vice president say, look, we had a giant crybaby with his hands on the button, and we had to get his hands off the button before we could be ourselves. And it goes, for me, it goes all the way down to how Ted Cruz is, volunteering to argue his case, when this is the guy who he badmouthed his wife and said his dad shot JFK. This guy is now volunteering, like, oh yeah, I'll do it for you.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
And then what happens when
If-
gets in front of that hearing? It's a shit show. And
Yep.
what's Ted Cruz going to lead? Just a shit show, just to make it look like he's making an effort, because a literal fucking crybaby has his finger on the fucking nuclear button.
Yeah, but Mike, there's the one problem with that though, is that because if that were the case, all they'd have to do is 20th Amendment his ass, and they don't. I used to think it was, obviously there's a certain amount of his grab for power because obviously he's a useful idiot, and they got a lot of things they wanted out of him. And then I started thinking, they had simple stuff like he had some politically inconvenient information on them. Like I used to think, like Lindsey Graham, I used to think that he had some more concrete evidence that Lindsey Graham is gay. But you know what? One of the Lindsey Graham's Rent Boys has already come out, and no one gave a shit. At this point, I'm like, there's video of him like fucking children or something, because otherwise, like, I can't imagine that he hated Trump on a Thursday, he went golfing on a Saturday, and then he was metaphorically felating Trump on Sunday.
Yeah. I hello, Sister Danger. Hello, Joe. Welcome. Right. So I actually, I can't help but speculate. I know it's not worth any more than speculation, but I can't help but speculate that they Trump has something on almost all these people in the Senate, because that to me, that's the Occam's razor of the whole thing. The simplest explanation to me is blackmail. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jack.
Epstein?
I have a little bit of a. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, nope. I have nothing. Go.
Okay. I have a little bit of a different take, which is, who's familiar with Roy Cohn? Does anyone know that name?
He's a lawyer, isn't he?
Okay. So Michael knows a bit about this, but Roy Cohn's history is super complicated. He is essentially the guy who taught Trump everything he knows. Roy Cohn worked with Senator Joseph McCarthy back in the 1950s on the, House Un-American Activities Commission. Roy Cohn is a well-known sort of, the worst of the worst kind of New York lawyers who worked with the mob, was very much, a mover and shaker, hung out with all the New York royalty, was apparently, fake married to Barbara Walters for years. The thing about Roy Cohn is that Roy Cohn was gay and relatively well known to be gay, even as he's doing the Lavender Scare, even as he's like, prosecuting and persecuting people, for like the most subtle, implication that somebody might be gay could, get them kicked out of government or kicked out of Hollywood, all these kind of things. And even though Roy Cohn was taking home, young men from Studio 54 all through the 70s, he didn't consider himself gay because he was this power broker. He was this guy who could be the best friend of the rich and powerful. He was a fixer. He could make things happen. And in a weird way, it sort of like gave him this impression. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I'm curious. Why are we talking about Roy Cohn?
So we're talking about Roy Cohn because we're getting to Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, I think, probably has the same kind of mentality about what his sexual orientation is. Roy Cohn sort of thought of gay people as victims, and in fact, there's a wonderful thing that the AIDS quilt has the one swatch meant for Roy Cohn that is what is it? Bully, coward, victim, and that's all.
Angels in America. Roy Cohn was depicted beautifully in that miniseries, Angels in America. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's amazing. It's about AIDS and it's about Roy Cohn and other people, but Roy Cohn and his character, and obviously based on real life. But part of the script, his character says things like, "I'm not gay. Yeah, I sleep with men, but I'm not gay. A gay man doesn't do what I've done. A gay man gets used. A gay man gets abused. A gay man is a loser. I am not a loser. I am not a homosexual. I sleep with men."
Do they not know the meaning of words?
Well, I mean,
but
he just pretended reality didn't exist. It was put on hold for him because he had power. So therefore, he wasn't subject to those kinds of definitions.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I want to get to with the people who Trump has in his circle, who are very much his sycophants, like Lindsey Graham. I don't think it's blackmail. I think it's a psychology. I think that it is a mentality of, as long as I'm in this club and I'm a power broker and I'm a fixer and I'm a mover and I make things happen for powerful people, then I'm part of this like bubble that is immune to everything. Of course, Roy Cohn wasn't immune to everything. He ended up dying of AIDS, which ruined him in a weird way, due to all, like, Roy Cohn, fortunately, one of the few villains of history who got some measure of karma because his own actions sort of resulted. He was literally hoisted by his own petard. Anyway, I'll let other people talk.
I just wanted to say really quickly that Trump, I think you're being far too generous to Trump and the power of his charisma or power broker ability or whatever, because it's all illusory. And if I can see it as a regular person out here on the mountain, sure these politicians with way more experience can see it. You know what I mean? Let me just before you go, Rob. Let me just say, and I know I've made this example before, but 2000 something odd years ago, plus or minus, it took all 53 senators to stab Caesar. They all had to be in on it. In order to carry out the plot, they all had to be on it. And the problem with these Republicans is they're all afraid that they're going to be the only one who's not in on it. So they're all in on the fucking corruption together. They're all in the same boat. That is effectively bribery, even if you're not holding money or a threat. You know what I mean?
I mean, the one other thing though too, as far as Lindsey Graham goes, if he had been like that earlier on, or his transition was more smooth, I might buy that argument. But he literally was dishing on Trump on the news like during the week, and then he went golfing on a Saturday with Trump, and then Sunday he's like, Trump's the best guy ever. And it was that like overnight. And I can't imagine that Trump is so persuasive that, he just said something that just clicked so much with Lindsey Graham that he did an about face. Usually that's something like that takes time and there's transitions, and, you don't just go, like
Okay.
literally overnight.
All right. See, now I understand better. The conversation was basically saying that Lindsey Graham was blackmailed by Trump.
A bunch of people, I think, is where it started. That
I don't think just Lindsey Graham. I think lots of people are.
Yeah. I agree. I think Lindsey Graham absolutely was. The problem with that, though, is that his male lover, the guy he had been paying for all these years, has come forward.
Right.
And since he has come forward, Trump no longer had any power over him. Hey, I can hold this, over your head, and he still continued to support Trump. So, although yes, his change into all of a sudden, kissing Trump's ass. The day before he was like, Trump's crazy. You're right. Looks like blackmail.
Well, that's the reason why I don't think it's the gay issue at all, because like you said, the fact that enough people believe it that if it was going to hurt Lindsey Graham, it already would, and it hasn't. Clearly, he got reelected. So
I want to know what Sister Danger thinks about all.
I really think that some of that, that he had some underage people, and that Trump has evidence of it. I really think it all ties in with Jeffrey Epstein. I really do, because you think about it. because Epstein, when he befriended Hollywood people and politicians and rich people. Epstein probably had dirt on everybody with 7-figure balance sheet or more in the country. If there was dirt to be had, I bet you he had it. And with all these parties and all that, so I think it really comes down to, yeah, I've got all this, and you're gonna play ball with me, and hey, you'll benefit from it. I'll help you. I'll do good things for you, but you have to be on my side, or else I'm gonna destroy you.
Side note, and complete veering off the conversation, which I don't want to do, but just hands up, how many people think he's gonna pardon Ghislaine Maxwell?
Maybe. I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting about Trump, and that's very different from his mentor Roy Cohn, is that Trump doesn't have loyalty. Cohn is a guy who, the thing that gave him the power and made him this master manipulator was the fact that he was extremely loyal, and he was always going to be there for the people he was connected to, and he was a fixer on that kind of level. Trump is just not that smart and not that dedicated, and so he's going to leave somebody like Ghislaine Maxwell, I think, to hang in favor of people who can do more to save his butt in the moment. Like whatever
Right.
Ghislaine can do, like she's basically worthless to Trump, other than she probably has info on him, probably
But what
has.
did Eddie Gallagher ever do for Donald Trump? And what did pardoning Eddie Gallagher possibly do that could be in any way be perceived to improve Trump's image? I mean,
Who's Eddie Gallagher?
Eddie Gallagher was a Navy SEAL who just
right.
randomly murdered civilians for the kick.
Oh no, because his base.
Every single member of his team turned on him.
Because his
Yeah,
base,
no,
because
Joe's
basically
right.
at the end of the day, his base doesn't give a fuck about dead foreigners. You can slaughter that. Look what happened. Like when Bush was president, they didn't care about Abu Ghraib. They didn't care about other atrocities committed by soldiers, because what they don't like is even though his other soldiers rolled on him, what it comes down to is they're very simplistic. And if you're doing anything negative to a soldier, you're bad. It doesn't matter whether they deserve it or not.
Okay.
And it's not. It's not just that. There's a racial component here too. He killed brown people, and you're going to punish him for that? They deserve it. They're brown. He's a hero. He's an American hero.
Right, because basically their attitude is if somebody is quote unquote a bad person, you can literally do anything to them and it doesn't matter.
With deep respect, though, the problem that that seems glaringly obvious to me with that is that there's a whole other world out there. It's not just the United States, and we're setting an example that we will pardon literally anybody.
Trump doesn't give a fuck.
Trump don't give a shit.
Even clearly war crimes. War crimes. Hey, man, no, we don't do that. We're Americans. You're off.
But it sends a message. But like you said, it sends a message. And the message it sends is that we will put the people who are ruthless killers in your country, we will put them on a pedestal. They're heroes to us. Sure, they're international war criminals. Sure. But to us, they're heroes that we can put on pedestals. That's the message that Trump thinks it sends.
Right.
Yeah. I've talked about this idea before. There's the term everybody's familiar with, which is virtue signaling. Is my mic loud enough? Or you have
could use a little bit of a boost. Actually, Rob's is really loud.
So
out of nowhere.
There's this everybody knows the phenomenon of virtue signaling, and there's a certain element on the right that has perfected what I call monster signaling, which is very much what Rob is talking about, where you will deliberately send a performatively cruel message to your peers to show you, to sort of brag about how heartless you are and how, vicious you can be. And it's the same thing that you see when Tucker Carlson says that old people should be willing to die for the economy. That's monster signaling.
Well,
But
think about what happened with anytime an unarmed black person gets killed by the police. What is their answer? Oh, well, they were breaking the law. So it doesn't matter. It could be the simplest of things. Oh, yeah, he was selling loose cigarettes, in violation of the tax code. But so it's okay that he got strangled to death because fuck it, he broke
Right.
the law. It doesn't matter, taking paper from work or raping a child, all the same.
right.
Very Calvinist.
Yeah, or with Breonna Taylor, well, some of the friends she had were bad people. If she didn't
Right.
want to die, she shouldn't have been hanging out with these people.
Right.
Which is like getting so far away from what the person actually was involved in. But yeah, so Trump is sort of maybe the best monster signaler I've ever seen. And so when we're talking about
There,
who which pardons actually help him, the things that do help him are the things that make his sort of base more and more committed to him. And there's nothing about Ghislaine Maxwell, who is part of the whole QAnon conspiracy and everything else, that pardoning her doesn't help Trump at all. And in some ways, like, he can't bring himself to totally put distance between him and her, because I don't think he actually sees her as doing anything wrong. I fundamentally don't believe that Trump thinks that fucking kids on an airplane or a secret island was actually a wrong thing to do. He bragged about how Epstein loved younger girls, so it's like, but he also is conscious of what his base wants from him, and the kind of sort of routines that he does on in his stump speeches, his patter, Carney patter, tends to have the kind of monster signaling in it that will rile them up, will get them more and more on board with him, in this sort of again, very cult-like way.
Well, and think about it too. Even as far as the the underage victims. I mean, if you think about it, to them, Trump be messing around with I'm sure they think it's teens, like late teens, but to them that's virility. He's an older man. He can still bed a 17-year-old, that, or a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old. That's just because he's strong and virile. Yeah, it's a really fucked up mindset, Paul. But that's the thing, and it's hard. It's hard to actually, if you don't think that way, it's hard to get into the mind of it, and it's painful. But that's literally the way that they think. Just like if you think about it, when the Access Hollywood tape came out, how many right-wing women I saw, with signs and shirts saying like, "He can grab me anytime," and it's like, yeah, if they so yeah, go ahead and just do that. You can. It's perfectly fine to do that. And of course that means they don't understand what consent means. But
I want to drive the conversation back around again, though, to what we sort of strayed, because I mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell, but I mean, this whole idea about where's the corruption coming from? Is it bribery? Is it something else? Because Lindsey Graham and Ron Paul in particular were vehemently against Trump, and Ted Cruz, I suppose, before he was elected. And Lindsey Graham in particular, you're not wrong, Joe. He went golfing and everything was different after that.
Right.
And
like
that's
day.
Kind of an obvious, that's an old one. That's the kind of thing you see in 1950s movies. You go golfing with the guy, you make him a deal because there's no witnesses. Everything's cool and casual. It's not even threatening, even if you show him the horse head in the golf cart, or whatever. But seriously though, it's kind of too obvious. And then we had that in the summer of 2017, we had that squad of 4 House reps and 4 senators go over to Russia on the 4th of July to meet with Putin and his people. And I don't think it's unreasonable speculation, although it's not worth more than speculation, but it's unreasonable to speculate that they were shown. We've got something on all of y'all here And if you don't comport with what Trump wants, we're going to blow the lid, And what would happen, because these 126 Congress people who just signed this letter, I saw talk on MSNBC this weekend about how there's people out there saying, hey, they've violated the 14th Amendment because they've effectively committed an insurrection against the government. Rob?
So sedition.
Yeah, so first off, if I remember correctly, that trip to Russia was partly funded by the NRA also.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, they were actually funneling money for Russia into the U.S. elections. So there's that. And then, what the Texas AG just did, yes, it's I had mentioned earlier on Facebook that it was sedition, and I saw someone had said, well, no, because what they did was legal. It was a legal lawsuit. And I didn't reply, but I wanted to, saying it doesn't matter that they were using a legal means. They were using a legal vehicle to make their case. Their case was still seditious. Their legal means of doing it is undermined by the corruption.
Right.
So I mean, it no longer is a case of, well, they were just following the law by taking it to court. Yeah, no, I mean, the whole thing is corrupted by the fact that it's sedition.
Well, Sister Danger, Sister Danger's been here for 15 minutes and she hasn't had a word in yet, and I just want to hear what you got to say.
I actually don't know particularly what to say. I do tend to err on the side that something sus is happening there. It's hard to imagine such a sudden flip-flop. I know that Epstein does seem to be, that was the word that I was trying to say earlier before Jack started talking. I just was like, Epstein, because it seems like that's a common denominator, I guess. And so there's that, but I don't know. I mean, we could speculate all day.
Well,
you know what I mean?
To Rob's point, what these guys that signed on, what they're basically trying to do is they actually, I mean, it's legal to sue, and you can sue anybody for anything, but that doesn't mean there's if there's no basis for the suit, and particularly when in this case, what they're literally trying to do is subvert the Constitution. They're trying to subvert the various state laws on the books and state constitutions as to how this process is supposed to go.
I mean, is it actually trying to do that?
No,
because I mean, I know that's what the lawsuit is is written to be about, but you can in fact sue anybody over absolutely anything in the United States, and it says I guess I kind of put these lawsuits that they're up there, I perceive them as being frivolous, as being kind of like copyright trolls, right? They are out there filing a lawsuit, not for the purpose of the lawsuit, but the purpose for being able to say, here we filed it. People can look at it if they want to verify it's a real thing. And now we can make all kinds of media and news out of it in the time between when we filed it and then whenever it just gets tossed out because it's frivolous.
So like, the big one, that's what Trump was calling it, was the big one, is basically the Texas AG was going before the Supreme Court to have the Supreme Court throw out the election results in 4 states that he is not the AG of. The way our Constitution is written, every state is responsible for their own elections. They run them.
Right.
What he was claiming was that these 4 states that were the swing states, that their method of doing their elections was decided upon unconstitutionally. But he doesn't have grounds or standing to say that. So he knows that. Everybody who signed on to it knows it. The Supreme Court knew it. So the whole purpose of it was to rile people up, for them to pay money to him, to Trump. So maybe Trump would also maybe pardon him for his crimes, and to get enough people upset that they might go out into the streets with guns.
Well, and that's the other thing, and that's the part where it goes beyond the simple like copyright trolling, because copyright trolling is just doing it for money. So, but this is also to create an insurrection. It's to foment an insurrection, and that is seditious because that is exactly what they want. That's exactly what they're trying to do, and that's why. And you can tell in their Reddit, because one of the things they put out was a piece of paper saying to right wingers in Arizona, "Are you ready to die for this?" Ready to die. In other words, are you ready to go to war? Are you ready to commit violence, acts of violence, where you might potentially die? That is fomenting insurrection. They're not mutually. It's not mutually exclusive. You can be copyright troll and be fomenting revolution or insurrection.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, with regards to the overall question, one thing I do feel fairly convinced of is that all of these people are in bed with each other in a circle of silence, and that there has got to be a weak link or two that are there. And I wish to whatever deity there may you pray to, that somebody could find those weak links and just fuck them up, because as soon as that egg gets cracked, it's gonna just, all of it is gonna be horrible, right? And just everybody's dirty laundry about everything will come out. And maybe we don't have to wait for Congress to die. Maybe they'll just all show themselves to be criminals in some way, shape, or form, and we could put them in jail where they probably all belong anyway.
Well, here's the other thing too, is that I keep hearing from various sources that are connected, that particularly Senate Republicans don't in private say that they don't like him. There's staffers that are contacting members of the media saying, yeah, they really hate this guy. So if that's another reason makes me think that it's blackmail is a big part of it, because if they just really just true believers, okay, that'd be really scary, but okay, you could get that at least. But the fact that they don't like him and they are somewhat afraid of him. And again, it's not just about their jobs, because especially now, Lindsey Graham, he got reelected. He's there for 6 more years. Mitch McConnell's there for 6 more years. There's nothing Trump can do. And with the case of McConnell, he's 78. He's not running again. This was his last election. So he's not running again. In fact, I'll put $50 on the fact that if the Democrats win the 2 Georgia seats and the Democrats take control of the Senate, he will resign in less than a year.
It is not good enough for me. There's no justice in it. There's no justice.
He doesn't want to be in the minority.
I'm going to retire happily off in the middle of nowhere and fade from public memory.
Dick Cheney.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that if you are in a group circle in bed, if you're silent, you're all doing it wrong. so there's that.
Say, regarding what Joe's saying about blackmail, the reason I'm not totally on board with the idea that this is strictly a blackmail situation, and I also want to respond to what I think Phoenix Writer said in the chat about Trump's too dumb to be doing this stuff on his own. It must be Putin's manipulation. I think there's 2 things. We're giving too much credit to the way people operate, that they would need blackmail to be this bad. And the fact is, people can just be terrible. And Lindsey Graham can just realize that this is the train I want to be on because he won the election. And there doesn't even have to be any threatening stuff happening, at a golf game that tells him to get on board. He can just realize this is the group that I'm a part of and I want to be a part of.
But these guys, Lindsey Graham and McConnell and everybody else who just won this election, don't need Trump anymore. They could all turn on him right now and say, demand that he concede, and there's nothing he could do about it.
But Trump is a toothpaste
hang on,
too.
Because I've been waiting for ages. Unless he had something on him. But I tend to agree with what Sister Danger said 5 minutes ago, which is that maybe he doesn't have something on them. Maybe it's just as simple as they're all in on it together. They're done with democracy. They're done.
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, yes, they probably could, you know, if there is not the blackmail, they can just turn and say the thing. But there's more. What they would be giving up if they did that is they would be giving up the classic Republican, everybody toes the party line no matter what, right? They would be giving up that solid unified front to come out and publicly say something like that, even if they could do it with safety from Trump, right? They're still giving up something that the party in general has held up long before him. And I see no reason why they would not continue to do that.
Because it's not Trump who they're totally afraid of. Trump is a toothpaste tube, and he's almost exhausted. They're crimping up the last little bit of the tube to try and get the last little bit out of Trump before he's totally out of office. That's McConnell and Lindsey Graham and those folks. But the people who will exist long after Trump is gone are his base, and that's who they're still committed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of like you know, yeah, they don't need him anymore because they've won their elections and blah 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 blah. But if they turn their backs now, they're not going to win the next one. And so that's where they're at. They kind of put themselves against the wall. They're kind of trapped in between the Reagan mindset of never talk bad about another Republican. That was Ronald Reagan that started that. And Trump, which is never talk bad about Trump. So,
well, see, I just want to address what you popped Quink up there, and so first off, the prior thing I want to address really quickly. Just that Quintus said, what about Cynthia Johnson openly calling for BLM and military to murder Trumpers? No, she said to make them pay. That doesn't necessarily mean now it was still wrong. So I'm not gonna stump for her. However, I'm going to correct your misrepresentation of what was said. And also, I know for a fact when she said soldiers, she's not talking about the military. She's talking to black men. So, but now as far as the that they're colluding with the DNC, that is literally the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen in chat in any of these things, and that includes anything and everything that Curious has said.
Wait, hold on. Well, no. Nobody has quite hit that level yet. I might have a personal vested reason for saying that, but actually, do you really think that? Because I mean, surely you don't actually think that the DNC are wearing little angel halos and innocent of all crimes.
No, quite the opposite. But the idea that BLM and the DNC are collaborating is they're GOP. At war.
He's saying the GOP and the DNC are collaborating, and that's just fucking stupid.
Well, I mean, that's just kind of. But before we came on, before we were live, I think we were talking, right, Jack? It was just before we went live. We were talking about the protesters, the Trump-based protesters that are on the streets right now are saying things like, destroy and burn down the GOP. The GOP is now the enemy of the Trump base because there is this belief that the GOP is colluding with the Democrats.
Right, because they're basically following the law. They're following the law and doing their job and not subverting the Constitution.
These are the same people who are calling for Republicans to boycott the Georgia runoff because that makes a lot of fucking sense.
I mean, the thing about that, Phoenix writer, is the GOP was going in this direction the whole time. Trump is a symptom, not a cause. So let's remember that. The reason why he was able to catch on is because Trump, the right wing, has been courting these people for 50 years now in increasing, aggressiveness.
I mean, I have to say, that's one of my personal, like, if I kind of lean into a conspiracy theory, that might be one of them. That just the Republicans and the Democrats have always been working together because it has been a long time since that they have essentially become, with our president and whatnot, the king and queen and the House of Lords, as in the classic House of Lords, not the current House of Lords like in England, but your nobles. That is what they are. They just have a different name slapped on them, and all of them share a vested interest in making sure three things are happening: that Americans are content enough that they don't rise up, so we're healthy enough, safe enough, and entertained enough that we're not rising up, and then going about doing whatever it is that they're doing, right, and keeping their own selves in this elite class. And
Were that so, we'd have a stimulus package.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I don't believe that for the same reason I don't believe in the Illuminati.
You think a $2,000 stimulus package is like, what?
Okay, I have to jump in because this is...
Hold on, the Bilderbergers. I mean, the Illuminati could be kind of a thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's like actually people getting together around a table going, what are we going to do tonight? Right? The same thing we do every night, Pinky, right? Like, not like that. But a connect, like people that, just like when you go to work and whatever industry you work in, if you're a salesperson, you make a network of other salespeople, that you trade references with, and you trade, potential sales with, or whatever. Like that's what they do, except for they're way more powerful than immeasurable amounts of money.
There's a far cry between networking and the Illuminati. I mean, that's the Illuminati are space aliens from the Pleiades system and shit. I mean, this there's a big difference.
Not the Illuminati, like the Bilderbergers.
Yeah, I mean, if you really go down that rabbit hole, we are a slave race.
I think the problem is
listen,
too many people are using the
hole.
same
Listen,
term.
hang on. Something that was said a minute ago, I think, really needs to be readdressed.
Okay, I'm going on mute.
What Michael said, because something Ayanna Pressley said today was, at this point, it's not stimulus checks, it's survival checks. And the French have a saying that revolution is 4 missed dinners away, right? And the fact that there's no stimulus checks or survival checks coming before Christmas, that means there's no relief for everybody who has been guaranteed not to be evicted up until this point, up until the 30th, I think, of December. There's going to be literally hundreds of thousands of people simultaneously evicted or face the consequences of not leaving. It's not going to be pretty. And they're doing this to make it as hard for Joe as possible. That's my opinion.
I'm curious.
Revolution might not be the people that we think it's going to be. It might be the people who are starving.
I'm curious. Can I just zoom in on something you said there? I'm curious what you all think. Let's just go down the rabbit hole of worst case scenario, and hundreds of thousands of people get evicted. What does that actually look like? Because in the real world, in order for somebody to get evicted, at least in Washington state, first, they send you a letter telling you that you're evicted. And then if they want to physically remove you from the place that you are living, the police must arrive and remove you. And then what they have to do with all of your stuff is they have to put it safely into a storage place that you have access to get at for a certain period of time before it can then be sold. Now, if that were to happen to hundreds of thousands of people, I don't see that we have a system that could do something like send cops to everyone's doors to kick them out of their house with all of their kids and their whatever clothes they can carry. And then we even have a place where we could empty out all these homes and apartments, put all of those belongings. There is not an actual system in place. I don't think that could be handled.
It depends on.
We're seeing that in Portland.
It depends on the state, though. In some states, particularly in red states, it's a lot easier to put somebody out. In New Jersey, it's hard.
It means that you are illegally in your place, but physically actually removing the people is the thing. And so I guess I see in my head, if that was an en masse thing to occur, the reality of it would not be people actually leaving. It would be something different happens in society. Because
it would be some kind of process that would resemble pogroms, wouldn't it? I mean,
what's a pogrom?
is where you get chased out of where you live because of who you are.
Oh, when was that?
Basically, to put
Yeah,
it
the
yeah, it
pogroms
happened-
were.
happened to Jews all throughout Europe, particularly in Russia. And,
Oh, it's a violent
and the thing is, though, is that yes, it's not like on day one everyone's going to be thrown out. But the fact is, the processes. I mean, some of them have already happened, but they will continue to happen, and that will step up. Because remember, there are 800,000 cops, and don't think that the states that are more aggressive about it won't hire more. I mean, it only takes a few weeks to in some states to be able to get cleared to be a cop. They will use muscle. You know, in the more authoritarian states, they will use muscle to kick people out. It's not, and it won't be pretty.
I'm some people are going to use forces that there's just not going to be enough cops to check on the fact that they're not cops. They're going to have hired muscle, and they're going to empty out their properties.
Right.
So
Not Pinkerton. What were the guys who were the like the basic private army in like the late 1800s?
Pinkertons.
It was Pinkertons. Okay, thank you. I was
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah, Pinkerton men. Yeah, they were just like armed thugs, and basically, yeah, they got away with it. They would just come in, and they were extrajudicial evictions and all sorts
And
of
they
other.
still exist
heinous
and
acts.
have been used recently.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, I want to show you something real quick.
Sure.
Look at that craziness right there.
So there's actually now a app that's kind of like Uber. If you guys want to join the ranks of the people evicting people, it's called Civil. It's CIVVL, because of course all apps have to have a misspelled name, right? But you can be a paid hired thug now. Just go ahead and fill out their application.
I feel like anything that has to call itself civil like that is probably like a dude bro that's telling you how tough he is.
Well, it's like a right to work. You know,
the
right to work.
opposite thereof.
Or the
Conservative
Patriot
naming
Act.
convention.
The
Clear Skies Initiative. The
Clear
Water
Jack's,
Act.
Yeah, to Jack's point, we saw that in DC at that church, and clearing that area. Half of those guys were private, security. They were not police. They were just hired thugs. And to Quinka's point, I think it's hilarious. I've heard this bullshit for 40 years that one or both parties is literally trying to crash the economy, trying to make currency worthless because somehow that would benefit them, and they never explain that. But it really makes me laugh that anyone who thinks that the most fiat of fiat currencies, aka Bitcoin, which is backed by literally nothing, not even by a government, would somehow have value if the economy actually crashed. You basically, it's going to be as valuable as if your hard drive crashes and your wallet is on your PC. It's going to be worthless because it's literally nothing. It's just people have decided it has value, which is fine. We do that with every other currency, but at least government currency is backed by the faith and standing of the government. So if you've made money on Bitcoin, good for you. It's a speculative asset. That's all it is. That's all it's ever going to be. But if you think you're going to survive, the collapse of the economy with that, you should go back to the earlier stuff that right wing fanatics do and go with gold. At least that's something hard.
Yeah. Well, the problem with Bitcoin, of course, is like if we're talking about a society-wide collapse, the thing that kills Bitcoin immediately is the collapse of the electrical grid because Bitcoin is all on servers.
Right. Yeah, it's just hilarious. I mean, well, the other thing I thought was kind of real super funny about Bitcoin, one of my favorite gotchas. Part of the reason, like a lot of people like it on the dark web because the idea was like, well, it's not, going through banks, so you can't trace the money. But of course, because of the way blockchain works, it literally tags every single person that it's been through. So it's actually more traceable than any other currency ever could be. Because there's never any way to get away from that. It's not like I can get cash out and then we can do a transaction with cash and wash the money that way. You can't do that with a Bitcoin because the blockchain keeps a record. And so the FBI has actually tracked people down off the dark web using Bitcoin to trace them, which is hilarious. I think it's great.
Around and imagines what I would do if there was total like economic collapse and suddenly we were in like post-apocalypse land. Like, what would be valuable? How would I survive? What, am I the only person that thinks about those things?
I think about stuff like that all the time. And
I live in a truck.
Exactly what would be valuable, what true wealth, it's not what we've been trained to think it is. True wealth is your own property, for example, that kind of thing. That's just one example.
Well, I think it's funny that Quick just said that, so that U.S. dollars backed by fairy dust and pink unicorns. Maybe so. That's actually more than Bitcoin's backed by. that fairy dust and pink unicorns would be an improvement for Bitcoin.
Well, it's interesting. People always say that the U.S. currency is a fiat currency, but it's actually not, because the world trades petrodollars. We don't talk about it, but U.S. Economy is really backed by the fact that we are the currency that the world trades oil in, and that's very important. In fact, we've gone to war many times to stop countries, and we apparently, or many people think, we killed Gaddafi because he wanted to get off of petrodollars and trade in another currency, and the same thing with Iraq, that we protect the fact that the world trades in U.S. dollars for oil, as if it was, at least as valuable as gold.
Right. Sorry. So there you go, Quink. You're wrong. Jack just trumped everything you just said.
Do you guys circling back to where we were before the Bitcoin part? I mean, this whole idea about insurrection has been fomented for several years now. In fact, it goes back to when Barack Obama was president. If you ask me, when the first senator, I can't remember his name, used the term Second Amendment solutions. Michael, do you remember who that was?
Yeah, that was Karen Angle, or Sharon Angle, I should say.
Okay.
And I don't believe she won, but that was something she said during a campaign. I believe she was campaigning in Nevada, but I have to check my memory on that.
What did she say?
It was in 2012, and I think it might have been 2010, but it was someone who said use the phrase Second Amendment solutions.
Oh yes, yeah.
To our political problems, and to me, if that's not a call to arms, I don't know what it is, really. And there's been more overt calls to arms over the past 12 months than the rest of my life combined prior to the past 12 months. I mean,
more recently, it's actually Donald Trump that has made that allusion to the Second Amendment people who could maybe figure out a solution to things. That's a Donald Trump quote from like last year.
The very first time I heard the phrase was back
it was Sharon Angle.
Well, I can't remember. But what I was going to say about Donald Trump is, I mean, his whole thing at the debate with Joe Biden in the first debate was, stand back and stand by. I mean, that's not stand down. We've discussed this before. Stand down would have been something else. Stand back and stand by is get ready, get ready to rumble. And so these people are primed and they're waiting, and whether or not they're successful is almost not material. I don't want to live in that America where people fight against each other over political bullshit. I don't want people to die because of politics.
I mean, the sad part is even violence aside, because of the policies of at least one of the parties, lots of people are currently dying, will continue to die. And that's why every once in a while you see somebody I see somebody post on Facebook about how can you lose a friend over politics? I'm like, yeah, politics is like, what should the tax rate be, or should we do, how should we handle healthcare? Should we do Medicare for all, or should we use some other solution? That's politics. It's not. These people don't deserve, some people don't deserve the same rights as everybody else. That's not fucking politics. That's base values. And if someone does, and they can have that, they can have whatever values they have, but I don't have to associate with them if I don't want to.
Absolutely right. And then, like today, I think it was today, the high court in Wisconsin, the judge actually said to the lawyers, this is a bit racist, isn't it? This lawsuit, because they were basically trying to overturn the results in 2 districts, I think, or maybe 3, which were, very diverse districts and highly democratic. And it couldn't be more transparent that it's not that they think there's a process problem with the whole election or any of that stuff. They're basically overtly saying, no, we don't think black people should be able to tell white people how to vote.
Right.
That's what's going on right now. They don't want to use those terms. I'll do it because this is a little tiny channel.
I think what they were doing there was actually seeing if it would hold up under the Voting Rights Act. Just like how they have to see if the gerrymandering is going to disenfranchise mostly black people, that there's this weight that's different than just like regular justice. We have to see, does it disenfranchise black people? Ever since the Voting Rights Act. And I think that's what the judge was getting at, was like, what you guys are trying to do is not going to hold up on appeal.
Right. And that's why, and although SCOTUS, unfortunately, a few years ago, took a lot of the sting out of the Voting Rights Act, not entirely, they didn't completely dismantle it, but basically the way it was before is that if a state was going to change their laws, there had to be effectively a means test to say, hey, what impact does this have? And does this change in the law selectively target one group or another? They got rid of, and it was certain states, and all southern states for obvious reasons, and then they got rid of that. And of course, as soon as that went away, those states that got freed up to what they wanted to do started putting more, when they started, cutting down the number of polling places in select communities and things like that. So the reason why before, at least, there would be automatic review. Now the people can still challenge those changes, but the onus is on them now and not the other way around.
Yeah.
I like your Cookie Monster outfit there, Amy.
So
I got dragged into the chat. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's some meat cookie conversation.
Meat cookie.
So just a little thing that irks me. It's Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's not like Paul was pronouncing it Ghislaine, although I can understand that might be a porn name for somebody going forward. But yeah.
Well, I like it pronounced Ghislaine and not like it sounds like she's some kind of purified.
I'm more than happy to allow her to correct me. That's fine.
So
but I like the name Giselle too. So
in following with a few of our friends that have gone down the QAnon rabbit hole, I've seen a lot of the connections that they've made between Epstein and Trump previously. Even Roy Cohn and Jeffrey Epstein. And it really does look like Epstein could have been a government operative who was paid to get dirt on everyone. And that this could have been a continuing operation, and that every 10 years or so, a little bit of this operation becomes public as some operative gets burned.
Operation Kitty Fiddler?
Yeah, basically. The whole operation is tempting powerful men with whichever kind of young kids they want, and then taping it and having blackmail over them forever.
How can you even do something like that without it being illegal to do?
Well, it is illegal. Totally illegal.
It is illegal. It's
your own island.
Well, no, I mean,
when does the law ever stop the law from doing something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a Iran-Contra affair. That entire thing was illegal. They did it anyway.
Yeah, they did it anyway, right from the White House. Yeah.
Here's one thing. Speaking of that, when you just said right from the White House, I'm glad. I'm sure I'm not the only one who remembers this because there are other old people here like me. When that first broke, Reagan actually came out and said it was an arms for hostage deal. Not we, I made a mistake. And then afterward, he was like, "Oh, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I didn't know idea what was going on." It's like, dude, you literally came out and said, "I, first person singular, made a mistake." So
my favorite Reaganism was when he goes, in my heart, I don't believe that I did anything wrong, but the evidence says different.
Well, it's actually kind of a legitimate statement, to be perfectly honest. An action can be taken that would morally be a good action, but legally be a not good action, a la Jean Valjean.
I think the phenomenon that Jack just referenced is writ large in our current president, Donald Trump. I mean, basically everything he thinks everything he does is right and correct. Whether or not he knows it's illegal is irrelevant. If it's for his purposes, it's right and correct to him. I mean, it's a pathology that's just taken to such an extreme. I don't even know what to do with it.
I'm not saying in politics that doesn't sound like a complete Jurassic load of horse hockey, but
So I need to interject with some levity. And that is like Reaganisms were great, not nearly as good as Bushisms. My favorite being, in these trying times, Americans are finding it hard to put food on their families. That was one of my favorites.
Well,
my favorite. Let me just do my Bush impression.
Okay.
The terrorists never stop trying to do harm to our people and our country, and neither do we.
One of my favorites, of course, was the fool me once, shame on you. You can't get fooled again.
Twice. We won't get fooled again.
Oh man, yeah, I mean,
I'm George W. Bush, and I approve this message.
See, and that's again, as fucked up as Bush was. And again, I don't like when people say, "Well, Trump is so bad. Oh, I wish I had Bush back." No, I don't wish I had Bush back. However, Trump is so bad that again, I can at least differentiate between the two, and I can say that George Bush was a bad president. He wanted to do good. He thought he was doing good, and he actually gave a shit about America. He was just clueless as to how to make that work because he had bad ideas.
Although technically, Bush still killed more people.
He was the decider.
I'm the decider. Well, I always remember with him about about talking about dictatorship. As long as I'm the dictator, But
well, I mean, there's no question, right? That's exactly what Trump wants to be, is a dictator. We used to speculate about George Bush, but it always seemed a bit fanciful by comparison. Whereas now it's our faces, by comparison, it seemed.
Oh yeah. No, well, and basically the problem, I think the biggest problem in the Bush administration was, I see George Bush was intellectually incurious and wrong about a ton of things, about practically everything. But I think Dick Cheney was actually evil. Cheney was nefarious. But I think Bush did nefarious things. I don't think he intended to be nefarious. He just was.
Did you see that biopic about Dick Cheney that starred
the movie? I saw the movie Dick Cheney.
The movie, yeah. What was the title of the movie?
I thought it was Dick Cheney.
I think it was just Cheney. I think it was
Cheney. Yeah.
It was Cheney, right? Okay. Yeah, I thought he was amazing in that movie as Dick Cheney, but I thought that movie was actually overly generous to Dick Cheney.
Oh, it was remarkably generous. Like
good grief, they were very easy on him.
Yeah, you come out of the theater going, "That's a good guy." like that guy is awesome.
It was far too generous, and also made him out to be at least at the beginning kind of dumb.
Yeah,
Right.
he did a little bit.
He doesn't strike me as being the airheaded,
No,
No.
guy. That was Bush. That was Bush.
Bush
You know,
was
the
the area guy, yeah.
Like the one thing I feel like can be said about them, though, about Bush and Cheney as well, just about many people that we kind of say are, that evil genius versus Trump, is that at least I feel that even Dick Cheney, even Bush, Trump, Ronald Reagan, I feel like at least those dudes had a small circle of people, like their families, that they actually really legit cared about, right? They had their kids, their grandkids, whatever. Like they had their family, and they did in fact care about their family and loved their family. And then like maybe the rest of the world is who gives a crap. But I don't even think Trump, like I don't even feel like his family registers to him as anything more than what can you bring to the table for me?
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah, he's a
imagine if
sociopath
Ivanka
on another
dyed
level.
her hair brunette. He would lose his mind.
I just want to quickly correct us. That Quinska is correct. The name of the movie was Vice. That was the name of the movie. Vice.
Right.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember it. I was drawing a blank.
It was a good movie, though. I liked it.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, Quincy, I don't think Cheney was a mastermind either. I just said that I thought that he was sinister, but he does. He also had people around him, like Paul Wolfowitz and the PNAC people who were basically giving him the information, and then he was like, "Well, I'm going to do that because fuck him."
Well, I just had a. Sorry.
No,
I was just looking at Quintka's comment there, like Cheney wasn't stupid, but he wasn't a mastermind. He dropped out of Yale. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that anybody who drops out of Yale is probably miles ahead intellectually than people that have graduated from, I don't know, the University of wherever.
You just made me think of some interaction I had earlier today with somebody who was going down the it's a trans women in women's sports is a problem bullshit. And this guy did the thing of like when I was in college, if I had come to the realization that I was a woman and I did sports and I would have been, I'm like, bullshit. Every fucking like low rent, low speed, low drag fucking motherfucker thinks that they were hot shit. And like, especially when it comes to sports, and like the shittiest major league player is way better than everybody else you've ever met in your life.
Yeah.
The guy who hits the Mendoza line for 12 years and has like 3 lifetime home runs, he's better than anybody you've ever known personally, unless you knew any major leaguers. And they're better than most people who never got past the minor leagues too, because it's that hard to get to the major leagues. So it made me laugh. It's like, you think you could have, but you have no idea how good the people who do this stuff professionally really are, even the shitty ones.
Yeah. So okay, sports, boxing. Who here knows about boxing? In boxing, don't you have categories of people that are like lightweights, medium weights?
Yes, by weight, yep.
Okay, and same thing for wrestling too, right? Because basically they're like, we're not going to put a 115-pound guy against
me
that weighs 200 pounds. There's no competition. What if we just got rid of male and female sports and every sport was done by classes according to something like that? That way, it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female. If you fall like within this,
certain sports with that. I think the latest illustration of that would be Fallon Fox, and how this trans woman used her frame that she earned at growing up as a man with the same hormones as a man, and then transitioned, and then proceeded to beat people's faces into the point of having fractures all over their skull. It was brutal. And
the thing is though, but that actually goes to Amy's point, because she would be in a different class than somebody else. But the thing is that doesn't really work for like baseball or football, because you have specialists who are not like every baseball player is not 200 pounds, and you can't, and you're going to have those fast guys who weigh 135, who play center field, who can run like 10 times faster than everybody else and cover way more ground. And football, same thing. You have special teams people. You have like every kicker is like 4'2". They could never play on the field any other time, but they're great at kicking the ball, and a lot of them are like ex-soccer players. So it wouldn't really work. But I mean, you certainly can do it based on ability, and baseball really already does. I mean, you have the minor leagues and you have the major leagues, so you could do it there. And that's why when anybody who is against women in Major League Baseball, it always irritates me, because I'm like, if they always use the thing that, well, most women couldn't do it. I'm like, fine, yeah, right, yeah, most women couldn't do it. Also, most men couldn't do it either. There's been like 17,000. Yeah, there's been 17,000 people in the history of the world who've made it to Major League Baseball. That's it since the beginning. 17,000 people.
Or like
So
chick
we're talking like
Thrones.
super ultra hyper narrow focus. So the fact that most women can't do it is irrelevant, because most men can't either. And even if you say that the tiny fraction of the men can do it, maybe more than women, so what? If a woman shows the ability to do it and she can compete with the other players, she should be allowed to do that, because there's no reason, there's no like legitimate reason to prevent her from doing so.
Right. Which is essentially what I'm getting at. Like, what is the reason? I mean, the real competition isn't between boy and girl. The real competition is against people of different skill set classifications, right? I mean, that's really what you're looking at. Like, I don't know how to describe what I'm trying to say, but I think you guys understand.
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, and that is where I differ to some degree with some of my friends who are trans allies, because they feel like, I get what they're getting at, because they're like, well, but you still need to have women's sports to protect women, so they have the ability to get out there. I'm like, well, I don't think that's true. I think you could have, like you said, if you had multiple leagues and multiple skill levels, then everyone would fall into whatever league that happen to work on.
Right.
As long as we give equal access to them to advertising dollars and being on TV and competing in various schools, so we actually allow that to take place, then it shouldn't be an issue.
Right. That's kind of where I'm going with that. And so now that we're done with something completely different.
Yeah, I kind of went that way with this.
I ran with the ball.
I think Ronda Rousey's take was best, because she said it depends on like how early someone started their transition. That they could be considered female for the purpose of fighting, because what happened with Fallon Fox in those early fights was so brutal.
I don't actually know what this is about. Who is Fallon Fox?
A trans woman
MMA fighter
decided to fight MMA, and the first few fights that she had, one of them, the person didn't even know that Fallon was trans, and ended up getting kind of brutalized. And so
there's a YouTuber who's done a really deep dive into this, and I don't agree with everything he says, but you can't deny that he digs into the details pretty deep, and that's Noel Plum, who has done a series on trans athletes in various sports. And I'm not really taking a position on this. I think it's just good to collect information and sort of understand the arguments. I do think that in the fighting sports, we should pay attention to like what are the consistent sort of outcomes, because it is a sport that includes a lot of violence, and it's important that athletes be protected from the worst kinds of violence, even in fighting sports. So, boxing, MMA, Muay Thai, those kind of things. There's still a standard that we keep where we want athletes to come out of a fight, not having, died or being seriously injured or all these other things. So there's good reason to sort of dig into the details and understand what the likelihood is. But to Joe's point, like that group of people who will not only make it to being an athlete, at that level, but then that much smaller group of people who are also trans is such an insignificant, like it's a tiny, 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 I can't say tiny too many times, minority of people who end up there. But it is still a consideration that, we don't want people getting skull fractures.
Oh, I agree with you there, but in the same token, you look at like Mike Tyson's early career. I mean, he wrecked a bunch of people, and he was a man against other men. So, it's easy to point out, well, this one trans woman, beat a bunch of people to a pulp. But were there any other like cis women that beat anybody else to a pulp? I mean, maybe there wasn't, but maybe there is. And if there is, then it tells me, well, then it's a matter of, okay, now it's really how do we segregate people of different ability levels so that we have fair fights, and you said, and we're not having people unnecessarily put in danger, because like Tyson just wrecked a bunch of people.
Well, interestingly, it was just the first part of Fallon Fox's career that we're the most worried about here, because in the end, it was a cis woman who beat Fallon Fox.
Right.
And higher promotions wouldn't take the fight onto their cards because they wanted nothing to do with it. But it was finally a cis woman that put a loss on Fallon Fox. Yeah. And so at that level, Fallon met her match.
Right.
But it's in earlier fights that were just.
Well, now Ronda Rousey, is Ronda Rousey a trans person or not? Or not? I don't know. I don't know. I know her name. I've seen her.
I mean, she's not a bush champion,
she was asked if she would. When Ronda Rousey was champion, she was asked if she would fight Fallon Fox. Basically, because Ronda Rousey was so dominant,
right?
Might as well go for something that might be a match.
Because again, the whole thing is about whether the person was born male and transitional. Because look, at my most fit, at my strongest, and look, I'm a powerful guy. I'm tall, and even though I've never been someone who could deadlift a lot, but like I've had 4 or 5 people try to take me down, and they can't do it. It's like because I'm good at leverage and I can do all these things. So, but Ronda Rousey could wipe the floor with my face. I have zero doubt that she could kick my ass now and way back then. The most fit, most agile and strong Joe in my entire life. I'm like canvas meat. So it's just this assumption that someone's trans, they're automatically, and that basically is the same idea. Then every single man can beat every single woman, and that's bullshit.
Right.
It's the considerations I've learned with the fighting sports that, for me, made what happened to Caster Semenya so much worse, because that sport of running is not hurting anybody else.
Right.
And Caster is cis female.
Right.
And just has too much testosterone.
Right.
But it's natural. She's born that way. She should be able to compete.
Right. Yeah, they literally said, and I do have to wonder if there was a bit of bigotry in there, as of the fact that she's not white, and we got to
chalk it up to anything else except for they want a few more white people to win that medal,
right?
And Caster's going to dominate for a couple more decades,
right? We lost Amy.
Oh yeah.
So as the only person on the panel that has any experience with hormones and taking them and having your body change because of them, I don't know any of the people that you're talking about, but I don't know if being trans and being in a fighting sport is different than other sports. I don't know. I'm not a sports person. But I do know that once you're on hormones and they reach a certain level, and you're male to female, your muscles are completely different. They're no longer male muscles. They are female. In the way that the muscle tissue for men, if I remember this correctly, is like basket weaved, and that's why it's so strong. The fibers of the muscle is why it's so strong. For women, they're not. The fibers fit together like this.
They're elongated.
One of the reasons why women don't bulk up Or why it's very difficult for women to bulk up. So they're weaker just by the way that their muscles are put together. I have been on hormones long enough that I have the same muscle tone as a woman. I mean, it's no different. So
I think that's why Ronda Rousey was saying that when Fallon Fox's shoulder became like a man's shoulder, like elongated, the bone structure is what can't change. So she's like,
right.
if people start transitioning early, then there's no problem because the
So
bone.
that larger frame, like I have my chest is kind of broad, my shoulders are kind of broad, and that would give that athlete more leverage.
Yeah.
Right. But
More
the thing is,
physical.
there's women with larger frames too. I've known a number of women as tall or bigger than me, size wise. Not many, but they exist. So unless we're going to ban them too, you know, any cis women that have a bigger frame, it's a spurious argument.
And it's weird that she didn't fight Fallon Fox in the end, but she did end up fighting Holly Holm, who has a very masculine looking build. And there's Chris Cyborg that's still out there, who has a very, very masculine looking build. You're right that there are some women who just reach that state naturally,
Right.
and we're not questioning them and their appearance in fighting.
We don't. It's and like I said, you know, the points you made about you know, there may be, you know, some, like, you know, in the margins, a few things that need some attention, but as a general argument, it just really fails because we're not consistent. At least if people were consistent with it, I might buy the argument, but we're not. And then again, it begs the question again: if the big frame is a problem or the testosterone levels are a problem, then that means we need multiple leagues so we can split. Okay, here's the people with big frames and lots of testosterone, and here's one for people with little frames and less testosterone, and let them compete. I mean, you know, hell, I'm all for leagues of, like, you know, big old fat guys like me too. Yeah.
Sometimes that happens in the UFC. We've seen it.
Although I suppose I could go for sumo, because there's sumo guys that make me look slender. But, and actually, when it comes to like odd frames, I mean, I'm, you know, just say if I was like svelte, I'm never will be, but if I was, I'm about 3 inches broader across the shoulders than almost every single person I've ever met in my life. And same thing, I have extremely wide hips. Like when I was at my lightest weight, you know, I was working out and lifting in college, and I lost a lot of weight. I'll never get below like a 46 or a 48 waist because my hips are that wide.
Wow.
I'm just a mutant. If I was tall, I mean, I'm 6'2" and a half, 6'3", somewhere between 6'2" and 6'3", depending on which measurement you trust. So I'm abnormal, but I mean, and it's weird because every once in a while I will run into somebody bigger than me, but it's weird. they're mutants. But my shoulders don't fit through door frames. I actually have to turn sideways.
So
I'm trying so hard to imagine that in real life, actually.
Yeah, we have that person. Yeah, Rob knows.
What do people think of Tulsi Gabbard's sort of, I don't know if it's a heel turn or just sort of a heel reveal?
Heel reveal.
What? I don't know nothing about it.
Oh, that she signed that letter about you know, protecting women in sports. It flows from the conversation. Tulsi Gabbard's very worried that trans women will ruin sports for cis women.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, she's had a number of things over the years that were questionable towards the LGBTQ community. Some more open than others. Plus the fact her voting present during the I've felt a lot. When people were saying that she was a shill way back, I believed it, and I believe it even more now. I'm glad she's out. She's gone in a few weeks.
Who is this person?
Senator
So
from
Tulsi
Hawaii.
Gabbard,
Not a senator.
yeah,
she's
she's
a person from Hawaii.
What?
yeah, congressperson.
Oh.
No, senator.
No, Tulsi Gabbard's a congressperson. She's not a
No, she voted in the impeachment trial. Well, you have to be a senator to not the trial, but the Senate trial. She voted in the Senate trial.
She's in Congress. I'm sure of it.
I'm pretty sure Congress as well, but now I'm not sure because I have to look it up.
No, you're
But,
right. You're right.
Yeah,
Hawaii
so,
second district, she's a
Second
congresswoman.
district. You are correct.
the thing about Tulsi Gabbard is she has this weird crossover appeal with Bernie Sanders voters, and I'm not quite sure why. And I was never a big fan of Tulsi Gabbard. I didn't know very much about her, but I knew that she met with Assad. And it's not the worst thing in the world for somebody to meet with a foreign potentially dictator, as long as there's an intention to create progress and
Sure.
move them in some direction. But it wasn't exactly like an official meeting, and that was always a weird thing. Several of her votes are weird. In some ways she seems more like she's just very libertarian, and so there's sort of this libertarian crossover with the left.
Right.
She's a confusing figure.
Following her back in 2017, I think, or maybe 2016 even. And because I really admired her sort of anti-war rhetoric. Where she's coming from, and what she was basically all about winding down the wars and stuff. And I think we are far too overextended for far too long. There's no excuse, as far as I'm concerned, for us being.
There are two things that I see.
Let me finish. But with Tulsi Gabbard, though, I went off her when I found out that she had previously supported torture, and I'm just not okay with that. That's the deal breaker for me. Go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just going to say that there seems to be two things with Tulsi that people really like, or that people seem to respond to. It's the anti-war. She's very like end all wars everywhere for no reason. There should be just end it all. And she's kind of pretty. A lot of guys
in
are
sort of a villain kind of way.
Yeah, no, that's true though. A lot of guys are there for her because she's attractive.
Right. She's got the white streak in her hair that kind of makes her look
Sarah
like
Palin.
Sorry?
Okay, I'm looking this. Oh, I like Sarah Palin was pretty. I'm looking this chick up.
I don't think she was, but a lot of people did. And yeah, she was popular just for a similar reason because
Wow, this chick is not hard on the eyes. That is for sure. Holy smokes.
Yeah, I think.
and I think people really liked her because of her stature too. Like, she has a pretty commanding presence on the stage. She's a military veteran. I believe she was a helicopter pilot.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like you said, that libertarian streak, it's kind of like, I remember, was it probably 2012 or maybe it was 2008 when a lot of liberals kind of got on the Ron Paul and then later Rand Paul bandwagons because their libertarian stance of being against the war. So if you just look at that and that's the only thing you're looking at, well, it sounds very appealing to progressives until you look at everything else they're for.
Right. Yeah, and that seems to be the way Tulsi Gabbard is, at least as far as I understand her. Again, I never got to be like I didn't jump on a bandwagon and have enough fandom to even really fully investigate her positions. But I was told by, certain very pro Bernie accounts that, if I wasn't also a Tulsi stan, then I was a bad, progressive or something, which was a really odd and actually was one of the things that put me off Tulsi more than anything was sort of this, insistence that you better
Tulsi
like her.
Anti-war and pro-universal health care. And I think those two really appealed to people on the left-hand side.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. She endorsed Bernie very early on, and I think that's why some of the Bernistas got into that mindset about her, because, well, she supports Bernie, so it doesn't matter. Everything else she does must be great because she supports Bernie.
I super want to hear about torture. Hey, look at that! A youngling. Hi. Here it is. This is it. This is it, kid. This is your shot at fame. There'll be fireworks everywhere. So okay, so can we talk about torture for a second? Or
Sure.
am I okay?
Take the floor.
Well, so you said that you are opposed to torture, and I am too. However, before I had swallowing my Dubliner cheese here. Okay, before I had anything like a refined view on torture, I either didn't much think about it, or I thought about it in the most simplistic terms of well, kind of like, well, whatever. It's like one of the aspects of war, and if that's the bad guy, then whatever. And but then I kind of got a little more refined about that, and when I learned that essentially the results of torturing people do not correlate. Like the desired results do not correlate with the actual results. Therefore, it just makes the act of torturing people sheerly an inhumane act, right?
Right.
Well,
Produces no positive results.
Right. And at that point in time,
Are you saying that if it worked, you'd be cool with it?
that is what the question that as soon as you said that, I was like, this is why I'm not cool with it. But I remember when I didn't have much of an opinion on it, and then my neutrality went negative because I learned these facts. But now I'm sitting here questioning myself, well, what if that wasn't the case? What if torturing somebody could, in fact, bring about the desired results? Under what circumstances, if any, would I find that to be morally acceptable? And then I was like, well, I don't know. Does anybody else, are there any circumstances here under which another person might find such a thing to be morally acceptable?
See, the thing is that and this reminds me of very much of there's a Mitchell and Webb sketch years ago.
I love them so much.
Oh yeah, where they're like, the sketch was kill all the poor. They're trying to figure out how to balance the budget, and the minister they're talking to, to put into the computer, what happens when you kill all the poor? And his adjutants object for obvious reasons, and they're like, no, that's not. And then he's like, well, I'm not saying we should do it. I just want to see if it would help.
Jack, mute yourself. Mute yourself, Jack.
The thing about it is that even if torture worked, see, the reason not to torture, I mean, is it's very easy to go down. That is actually going down the slippery slope of like, well, the ends justify the means. Like, if I can get the result I want by being the bad guy, and one of the things, even though the United States has not lived up to its rhetoric of being the good guy much of the time, I still grew up with that rhetoric, and I want it to be true. And what really separates the good guy and the bad guy, it's not their motivations most of the time, it's their means. Basically, that's really what separates you, is that you draw those lines and say these things are morally or ethically unacceptable, and whether or not they be effective, we're not going to do it, because I mean, basically,
but what makes it morally unacceptable if not for
I'm saying you've had that. Just say you've had. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole just yet, but I was basically saying you've made that determination. If once you've made the determination that these things are morally or ethically questionable at best, then and you can't. And like, one of the things that I growing up with was always that, well, we're the good guy because the other guys, like the Soviet Union, they torture and they do this to their people and they do that to their people and they do this to these other people, and we don't do that, and that's why our way is morally superior, because we don't do those things. So you can't then, if you start adopting the worst aspects of your enemy and use the justification of, well, they do it, so we can do it too, you've become your enemy, in which case then now at least your moral argument's gone. Now it's like, we like us and we don't like them. Then you can just say that then, and that's okay if that's your justification. But then the whole thing of they're the bad guy and we're the good guy goes out. We're us and we're them, so fuck them. That's literally what the argument becomes.
You're also protecting your own soldiers from torture when they get captured by the other side. If you say, look, we're not going to torture you. And if you get injured on the battlefield, we're going to take you into our hospital and sew you up and put you in jail until the war's over.
Right.
I mean, sure, when rules of war.
I know the concept of rules of war is kind of perverse in itself because, quite frankly, if you're facing an existential threat, you're almost justified in doing anything necessary to survive. Right. On the one,
that's kind of my point, right?
Right. Yeah, I hear that. But torture is ambiguous because, number one, and most importantly, you don't know that the person you're torturing has the information you require.
Right.
You're committing heinous acts of inhumanity against someone on a bet. No.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But
even if you know they know the stuff, it's still not okay.
If they're going to,
okay, because you don't know.
Yeah,
if all of that though is only the precursor to just taking them out back and putting them, in the lineup and killing them, and there is some chance that it may get you something of value. Now that value doesn't even necessarily have to be information. What if, for example, you are using the person that you are torturing for no reason of actually collecting information from them, but instead as an outward visible deterrent to other people, not your own people. You're not using torturing them to frighten your people into
war crime.
Right. No, okay, but you're going to kill these people anyway. So before they go to dead, right? I mean, doesn't it work? I mean, isn't this why they do things like heads outside of,
If you got a line of people that you're going to kill and then you torture the first one, how is that a deterrent to the ones you're going to line up and kill anyway?
It's not them.
It's not.
It's not them.
I'll say.
I think what would happen is you send the message to the rest of the world, like you said, right? You're using it as right. The rest of the world now looks at you as the bad guy through and through. They're not going to respect you, the rest of the world, and they will most likely align their militaries against you.
I actually worked for an ex-German military officer years ago. So it was like one of my first jobs out of college. So this guy had been a German tank commander. His tank got hit, got set on fire. He was captured and treated well by the Americans because that was our way. It seems to be kind of not always there anymore. But because of that actually, he then was able to see the error of Nazism. He then actually became pro-America. He actually moved his family to America, started a business, and became a productive member of society because he actually felt that America's way was superior to the way the Germans did things because the Germans had a penchant for following rules, whether those rules were, morally or ethically compromised. And so that's another reason why you don't do it, because that does make a difference. You can say like, well, the terrorists don't care. The terrorists do bad things. Well, do we want to be terrorists or do we want to be us? So I don't. So because literally, yeah, if you boils down to, well, this can work, then you've actually provided moral justification to the other side to do the exact same thing to your guys.
I just want to point out,
even as a veteran, I have a different take, and it's basically the same reason why if we didn't eat beef, we wouldn't have cows, because if we just release them all in the wild, they're going to die off in a couple generations. We're not going to have them, right? If we don't consider prisoners to be useful in any way, we're not going to have prisoners. While I was in the service, I talked to some older servicemen who remembered the first Gulf War and how they were taught that in order to take a prisoner of war, you have to fill out a form. right? And those forms were not passed out to them. And this would imply to them, well, I guess we're not supposed to take prisoner of war right now. And the reason why they didn't take prisoners of war in those operations was because they wouldn't be considered valuable at all as intelligence, as leverage for bartering for our own soldiers back, because we use the Air Force first, bomb the hell out of people, and then use our ground forces to mop up the mess. We don't take these prisoners of war often enough. And what happens is our own soldiers incur very few casualties, and we're killing millions of their people who just happen to be their soldiers. Many of them between the age of adolescence to very young adults. We're wiping out whole generations of them because we don't take prisoners, because then we'd have to feed them, be humane to them, never torture them for information. It's a very fucked up situation when you take on a prisoner, right? You are then burdened with the cost of having them.
I want to hear what Jack has to say. He's been trying to say something for a second.
Oh, well, I wanted to say directly in response to Sister Danger's point that the times that torture does work and the way she's talking about are places like, Chile under Pinochet, when the point is an authoritarian government that wants to scare its own people. It's not as useful as a tool of war, despite maybe what shows like 24 might show, where you're scaring or you're torturing the combination to decode a bomb out of some suspect or something. The point of torture is terror, and that is really the only effective use of torture, is to keep a populace cowed in some
Which is what Saddam Hussein did, and what Pinochet in particular definitely did. I mean, they used to disappear people in the middle of the night, right? And just knowing that you could be disappeared is enough to keep you from criticizing the government in public, because you
and I just
vanish from your.
I wanted to point out that was us teaching Pinochet to do that. That it was the School of the Americas, or what we know of as I forget what the various terms it went under, but that school that we exported to the southern region of the Americas was designed to teach dictators how to keep their citizens under control, largely in order to enforce capitalism, which was very useful to the United States because it was our companies. It was United Fruit and various oil companies that wanted all those resources.
And the thing is, I also, when we're talking about morality, I mean, literally the way that, certainly, I mean, there's a lot of different ways one can assess morality, but utility alone is literally not the criteria, because otherwise you could literally justify anything based on utility. I need some more money, so I'm going to go stab my neighbor and take a shit. Plus the fact, Paul made the point about, the existential threat, and because I've had this conversation with people and they've done that thing, like the 24th thing, like, well, what if there's a nuclear bomb and, the only guy who knows where it is, who can stop it, he's right there. And, and I say, okay, I know what I would do in that instance? No, I don't. I hope I would not do it, but maybe fear, maybe, but then that's me not acting as a rational person. That's someone acting out of fear, out of panic, out of emotion. And that's not making a moral decision. That's somebody like, basically in fear for some horrible situation. So here's my point. Let me finish, please.
Okay.
But the whole point is that those situations where that could be even the possibility are so exceedingly rare that it's like the people who basically want to say, well, we should distrust every rape victim, because a tiny number of women don't tell the truth or whatever. So therefore, the fact that it could be false means we should disbelieve all of them. So yeah, maybe in that really ridiculous, unlikely scenario where there's a nuclear bomb about to wipe out New York City, and I could stop it if I torture this guy. I don't know. Maybe my emotion would take over, and I would, but I would not think that I consider did a moral act. That's never going to happen.
I guess that here's my thing is that I feel like either human life is valuable and therefore we engage as if that is the case, that all human life has some value that we recognize, or there is some point where we determine that that human life isn't valuable, right? Like, so let's say we're in some kind of a war. It doesn't even have to necessarily be like a modern war. It could be a crazy jungle guerrilla, it doesn't have to be like the way, but here you are, you're in this fight, it could just be two tribes or whatever. You determine that life is not valuable. That life is the enemy life. And at that point, I don't see the only thing that, don't torture it because that's inhumane, but you've already decided that life does not have humanity. So to say don't torture it because that's inhumane, don't harvest it for body parts because that's inhumane, don't use them to set an example to somebody because that's inhumane. You've already determined that they have no humanity. Therefore, all of these other little stipulations added onto it are nothing but a thin veneer. It is the appearance to your own self and to society that to make what is happening palatable, not that really that exists, because you've already determined.
Right, but wouldn't that be valuable in and of
societies
itself?
Together.
Would that? I think I would say that whether or not that would be valuable in and of itself is, did he quit or did he get bumped?
He vanished. I think you had a technical difficulty.
Okay.
I would just say that
it's value is relative, is what I'm trying to say to the situation.
Well, there's value in the appearance, and it's one of the stories about the Revolutionary War, which may be apocryphal. I don't know the full details. I'm not a historian, but apparently British troops were surprised at how generous and decent Washington was to the captured British soldiers, and that was one of the things that sort of set us on this path of saying, here's the way American soldiers operate that's different from our enemies. And again, it could totally just be propaganda or historical revisionism, but the idea is still a valuable one. It's the one that we've existed with for 240 years, that at least in principle and the optics of it are that America doesn't do these things that are nearly universally condemned as the kinds of things that villains do. And perhaps that's also our storytelling.
I want a moral argument against it that is not rooted in it does not have the desired outcomes and it does not have any real propaganda / PR value, right?
Well, it's the same difference.
Moral argument against it.
If you want the moral argument,
from my understanding of morality, something is immoral if it causes suffering, right? Especially if it's intentionally causing suffering. That makes it immoral. So torture is self-evidently immoral on that basis alone.
Right.
Or am I wrong?
That the moral argument comes from, like, we put people in prison and we consider that a kind of suffering, but it's, for whatever reason, we've decided that it's a tolerable level of suffering. And we think of that as more humane than the death penalty, which is a pain and suffering that is beyond what we're comfortable. We've put a moral line in the sand that's a level that we won't cross in general. Obviously, we've had the death penalty, and several states still have death penalties. But normally, and the way our laws are written, suffering really is sort of the key fundamental principle for why we would or would not do something that we consider moral, is whether or not we're doing something that extends deliberately pain for a specific purpose, rather than, say, accidental suffering like, poverty or homelessness.
Are we sure that Joe did not check out being mad or something?
I don't think comfortable with the topic, basically. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Sister, I think one of the things you said was that we need to give value to the lives of those soldiers. But one of the harsh realities of it is that they are giving a value to them, and it's a negative
I mean,
value.
yeah, but all of this is just a thought. This is just a thought experiment. I don't actually believe this stuff.
When I say torture maybe should be on the table as a means of getting intel from someone, I'm not saying torture like bamboo shoots under fingernails or waterboarding. Right.
The pair of destiny or
Right
something.
now we have the torture of a cruel and inhuman punishment of people being imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay for the better part of 20 years without ever having a trial,
Right.
which is we would never do to our own people.
It's inexcusable.
They're cruel and unusual. We are torturing them by not having them any means to get out of that situation whatsoever, and we're holding them for what? Intel, right? If we weren't holding them, they would be dead.
Well, some of them we're not even holding for intel. We're holding because we're afraid that if we let them go, that their bitterness at us for the things that we've done to them would justifiably make them hate America forever, and be, that we've created our own enemies that who would justifiably be permanently upset with us. And the reason the U.S. government isn't willing to let some of these people go is because they, even the people who say, I will hold no grudge against America and I feel no venom in my heart, they're still not willing to let them go because of this presumption that on the part of our of people in our government that these people ought to hate us for what we've done to them, and that's kind of a good reason against torture by itself. Go ahead.
20 years, though, wrongly, and you knew it the whole time. How would you feel about it when you got let out? I mean, it's like you say, it's justifiable, isn't it? To be pissed off at your oppressor. It's perfectly justifiable, I think.
It might make you want to join.
To keep them in jail.
So there's another form of torture that I'll bring up, and that's that we allow our own police officers to lie to our citizens in order to try to ascertain the truth. If we hold these people in Guantanamo Bay and we say, there really is nothing left for you to fight for because your country's been wiped off the map. Is that torture? I mean, it's a psychological tactic, at least, right?
Yes.
These are the kind of techniques that we allow our own police officers to do to our own citizens, but there are some that would say we should never do that to these prisoners because it would be torture.
I'm pretty sure the rules against torture, you're not allowed to use any form of coercion whatsoever. I think that's what the Geneva Conventions state, almost exactly that.
Right, but we break it constantly.
Questions, but you're not allowed to use any form of coercion. You're not allowed to starve them or beat them up or anything else beyond that.
Breaking them constantly is kind of meaningless too, though. It doesn't make it right. I mean,
I think that if
we're not going to let breaking them constantly happen to these prisoners. Why is it that we can hold someone in a holding cell for questioning until they're obviously tired, hungry, cold, turn down the temperature on the interrogation room. And these are just people being held for questioning. And we allow it to happen to our own citizens.
Like, this is straight up Stanford prison experiment stuff. I mean, like, yeah, that's the kind of stuff they did. They would just put each other in broom closets and leave them there, or turn the lights off where they were, or make them do their push-ups in underwear, right? Like, socially humiliate them. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with that. I mean, surely you at least have heard of it.
That is, and it's widely panned as something that should never be reenacted.
Yes, that is true.
I'm talking about the police that we actually want to do these things for us to our own citizens.
Right. And I think, one of the things that we're circling around, excuse me, is the fact that racism is a big part of why torture is either good or bad, depending. And I know I started this whole thing with Roy Cohn, but I want to go back to the very famous moment with Joe McCarthy, where the senator, I forget the name of the senator who said this, but finally stood up, have you no decency, sir? Speaking to Joe McCarthy. The context of that was Joe McCarthy and Roy Cohn were grilling this clean-cut, classic all-American white boy who was in the military, as they were trying to break the military in order to really get a person that they had a personal connection with from being drafted or from going to war. They were trying to keep somebody that they wanted, that they had a personal connection with, home. And they had been doing the Lavender Scare and grilling people in all levels of the military and everything else for months and months, or even going on years. But it wasn't until they attacked this like all-American boy that people got really offended, because this guy was the most clean-cut, fresh-faced 19-year-old or whatever military man, in the 1950s, when the military is the thing that everybody universally considers sacred. They attack that, and that was the bridge too far. It's not a bridge too far when it's Muslims, or when it's black people in a jail cell, or even when it's poor white people, from the South. That the line for what we consider moral also is related to this racial line, this sense of America being a place that belongs to a certain kind of white person. And that really can't be ignored in the moral argument, because when we talk about all the things, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Goth.
I want to explore what you just said, actually, belongs to a certain kind of American, right? Because I think there's an awful lot behind that, and I think it's one of those things where, like, most people kind of know what you're talking about, but we never flesh it out in specifics. So let's try that. Kind of American, what kind of American? What are we?
Well, we're talking about, particularly in that instance, it's that, nice white boy American, that everybody, you can get the judge to think of, that could be my nephew. That kind of, like, our vision of the wholesome, American, apple pie and corn on the cob kind of mentality. And
So
whenever
Emilio Estevez in The Breakfast Club, not Judd Nelson, basically, yeah?
Yeah. And anyone who is outside of that are sort of, there's circles that are progressively further and further away from our moral center, that we're willing to do worse and worse and worse things to, because they don't look like this idealized, almost Norman Rockwell depiction of what is wholesome America.
I'm chewing lettuce, so I don't want to crunch in your ear, but the whole reason I kind of brought this up a little bit because was when you mentioned it, Goff. Really, I found myself asking, well, one, because I was like, well, actually, what would my answer be if that question were put to me? But two, because I feel like this mentality of it's okay to torture the other guy is something that I see or that I feel coming out of the conservative half of this country. Like the more that this, like the Trumpisms, like the Trumpists, right? They're insane, and they seem to have no care. Like if you're not with them, then everything is okay and goes. And if you were asked to succinctly have an argument against that, the argument can't be because if I do it, then you can do it too. That's irrelevant. If you've already thrown all of those things out the window, like how do you
Because
see what I'm saying? Like they don't. I just feel like that doesn't exist for them.
the logical conclusion of that kind of hatred is, genocide, annihilation. You get rid of the people you don't like.
That's what they want to do.
No. We have to fucking face up, and this includes Trumpers, whether they like this fucking bitter pill or not. It's true. We have to share this planet together. It doesn't matter whether we agree with each other all the time or whether we look like each other or have the same religious practices or any of that bullshit. As long as we can basically leave each other alone in peace, we should be allowed to get on with it, right? But we're not leaving each other in peace. We've been intentionally stoked by not just Trump, but Trump in particular, to be divisive on all kinds of lines, not just political, but political are especially evident at the moment, right? But this whole program of fear and hatred has been brewing ever since 9/11, and probably longer than that. But definitely since then. We've been encouraged. We're encouraged to be afraid. And I know I've made this example in previous videos, so I do apologize for people who've heard me say this before, but. When I moved to Britain in 1989, the IRA was blowing shit up 2-3 times a year, sometimes more often. And the British people were never encouraged to be afraid of the Irish or to be afraid of Catholics or whatever. None of that was, and they weren't considered to be warriors. They were criminals. They were cowards because they couldn't use the political process. They were trying to use violence. The rhetoric was completely different than it is now. Nowadays, terrorism is something, they're the enemy. We have elevated these people to warriors. We've elevated them to the status of freedom fighters. That's my opinion.
They're Klingons.
Right.
They're Klingons.
I do have to wonder if the racial component works there too, because we're talking about, the Irish. We're not talking about a group that doesn't look like most Britons in some way. And so, a counterfactual, sure, like, there's no way to know exactly how this would work, but what would the Great Britain response be if the 1980s terrorists had been, Pakistani or something like that, like a group that currently is sort of derogated in
it's an interesting question because, over the past, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years, I've been riding public transport in London when I moved to London in 2013. And I noticed that something pertained then that didn't pertain back in the 90s when I used to go to London recreationally, when the IRA was still active. Because nowadays, when you ride the trains, there will be an automated, computer voice that says, if you see anything suspicious, there's this number to call, blah, 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 be on the lookout, all these things. None of that was going on the trains. What did happen as a result of the IRA was in London, when I first moved there to Britain in '89, in London, you couldn't find litter bins in the public anywhere. And because of that, plenty of areas of London had litter all over the streets. But you couldn't find litter bins, and the reason is because they would plant the bombs in the bins, walk away, and then 15 minutes later or whatever, the bin blows up and everybody around it gets injured. So they had to get rid of the bins. And that was a direct result of the IRA back in the day. But generally speaking, they played it down compared to now. You were not encouraged to be afraid. You were encouraged to be stoic and get on with it because we got this. You know, we got this. That was the attitude back then. Nowadays, it's like we're supposed to be afraid. We're encouraged to be afraid. Fear's good for them. It pisses me off, man. I remember a time when it wasn't like this.
Yeah, I always think it's a really strange thing that Americans are encouraged to be fearful, because it does seem like counter to our entire historical narrative of, the home of the free and the brave, that we're supposed to be this very, difficult to rattle people, and yet we have this, the last 20 years, but I would say going back, because obviously, you know, communist scares, red scares, devil worship scares, rap music scares, there's like our entire history. You can go back further than that. Certainly, black men raping our white women, like it goes back forever, that the thing that American politicians use to keep people on their side, or to rile people up, or to control a population, does tend to be make them afraid of, this specific group, or, something that might happen. I mean, going all the way back to many of the people who first landed in America on Plymouth Rock being these very sort of extreme religious people who had all these fears of witches and devils and everything else. So, maybe it's just baked into America as a country.
Mhm.
Going to
I feel bad that Joe's not here.
What's that?
I feel bad that Joe's not here. I feel like
I'm
I'm
sure
being
he'll come
bad.
back. Let's change the subject to something more cheerful. Last week we had a wonderful conversation for almost 2 hours about porn. So I'm sure we can't do the same thing again, although the audience might like it if we did. I thought it was quite entertaining last week when we had all that conversation. It certainly was unusual. Yeah.
Only 2 hours, huh?
Oh, well, two hours out of 4. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
I'm sorry. I guess I didn't mean to like derail that and make that into a hot button issue. I also didn't mean to imply that I approve of torture.
Let's stop talking about it just in case it's back. Yeah. No, seriously though, there's other things to talk about. Like, for example, the whole thing about the virus and the vaccine, right? Now, I personally don't know about y'all. What do you think about getting the vaccine and when you're going to do it, if you're going to do it? How long do you wait? Which one do you want? Do you get a choice? All that kind of stuff, because
I feel sketchy about it.
hey,
I feel sketchy about it.
you feel sketchy about it because of the time it took to put it together. Yeah, it's pretty record breaking.
I do
I'll
feel
say
like
this.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll-
So you're going.
I'll just-
You go after. No, you go first. You go first because I've talked a lot. So you go first.
Okay. I'll say just real quick that I think my only feeling about the vaccine is I will take it after, there's been enough people to take it that it seems relatively safe. But I already have a pretty good way of dealing with COVID right now, which is that, I'm physically distanced and I wear a mask, and those two things are pretty effective. I don't put myself at unnecessary risk. The idea of doing the same thing I've been doing for almost a year for a few extra months is not that, it doesn't put me out very far. I feel like I can get the vaccine when it seems like it's, very safe. And between now and then, I can continue to do exactly the same thing that has more or less kept me safe up until now.
So yeah, so I feel sketchy about the amount of time that it's taken to come up with a vaccine. Also, I've seen some or at least heard about some possibility that in women the vaccine can affect their ability to reproduce, to have kids. I don't know if that's true because I have not actually looked into it because the vaccine isn't out right now, so it doesn't fucking matter. It's just kind of like that's a thing that I've heard, but ultimately I just feel mostly sketch. Like this has happened too fast, and I guess I'd rather watch the servant take a bite of the soup first and see whether or not they keel over and die. That's a terrible thing to
to a
say.
comment in the chat. We won't be allowed to take it until the most vulnerable have taken it. So by that time, we'll know if it's safe and effective. And if it's not safe and effective, the most vulnerable will have all died.
I also had COVID too,
Which is really horrifying to
end of
contemplate.
October. And so then you're supposed to have those antibodies in your system for approximately 6 months or whatever, during which time I can do exactly the same time Jack said. I'm relatively not at risk of recontracting it. And so there's no particular reason for me to rush out and take it. I'll be honest, like I don't even get a flu shot. I don't think I've ever had a flu shot in my life.
Amy,
And what? No, I'm on a roll. Okay, fine.
Amy,
Okay, so Brits are already getting jabbed. So there's that. We're going to have a certain amount of data before it's going to be available on any large scale here in the U.S. There'll be a certain amount of, hey, people aren't blowing up as they're walking down the street. Good news. So there's that. Also, it's going to roll out so slowly in the U.S. because, well, it's the U.S.
Yeah.
That, again, by the time it's going to be available on any large scale, we're going to have data. So by the time it rolls around to me, yeah, I think I'll be pretty comfortable taking it.
Amy, the bit of pseudoscience that comes from the QAnon crew
Oh, is it really?
that you've bought into here.
I didn't. What, the reproductive
They
thing?
say that these vaccines are a way to sterilize women. That it's a direct plot from Bill Gates, right?
Is that actually what is that? If I would have known that, all I heard was that, hey, I heard that it does this.
Well,
I did not hear QAnon. I did not hear Bill Gates. I would have laughed it off the stage.
They say that the spikes on the coronavirus that this vaccine is teaching your immune system to attack, that they're the same as the endometrium in your womb. This is their theory, right? And so since the coronavirus has spikes and your endometrium has spikes, your own immune system is going to make you infertile for a little while. That's their theory. Now, if that were true and you have already had the coronavirus, Amy, your own immune system would have been taught by itself to attack the coronavirus. And so your immune system would already be eating away at your coochie pop. Okay?
Wow, Coochie Pop, that is such a new one. I love it, man. I'm gonna use that one. You know what literally what you just said sounds like to me? It sounds to me as if somebody got their hands on a health textbook with pictures, or maybe a virus textbook with pictures, and they were like, what is this? This is like the Voynich manuscript of health. What do all these pictures mean? And then just made up a story. That is what everything that just came out of your mouth sounded like to me.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
That's crazy. No.
Yeah, this thing has a visual similarity in this textbook to this other thing.
Like, yes, that is basically that's stupid. No, so I've never had a flu shot. Well, maybe once I've had a flu shot, and then I didn't ever get them again because I got sick. And I thought, well, you know what? If you have a good chance of catching the flu anyway after getting a flu shot, then F it. I'm not going to have my arm be in pain if I'm just going to get the flu.
Okay, well, you do know that there are like multiple different strains of the flu.
Yeah. So.
And that every year when they do the flu vaccine,
Yeah.
they're guessing at what they think is going to be the strain that's going to be big that year.
Yes.
Sometimes a combination vaccine because of whatever's happening. And sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they guess wrong.
I'm just
Well,
saying. You
I
gotta
think
get
what's
the business
interesting about this is that they're actually testing a new type of vaccine vector, which is the messenger RNA, which um, is it's interesting because it also is apparently a pretty significant breakthrough in vaccine manufacture. And I kind of have to wonder if this idea of using mRNA as a vector for vaccines is an older idea that maybe people have been tinkering with, just because of how quickly they were able to develop this very new technique in order to deliver the vaccine. And the level of effectiveness that not one but two different companies in two totally different biotech fields are reporting from a vaccine that is using the same basic technology really makes me think that, you know, this could actually be a pretty significant medical breakthrough, you know, on the level of like originally penicillin, where we've sort of applied a new way to approach an old problem. And you know, potentially the fast tracking of getting a new vaccine combined with the fact that we're dealing with a novel virus kind of made people think outside of the box more in a way that potentially produce something that will be very beneficial to other vaccines. This could theoretically, like if we've learned a new way of making vaccines, we might go back and build better vaccines for the flu and all the various strains of the flu, because we were doing vaccination very differently for the flu for, you know, 30-40 years.
Well, part of flu
And the
vaccination
flu
issues, though, is its mutability, right? It's
right.
not that there's just so much of it. It's just that it can literally mutate so quickly from what we had to what it is this season that it's impossible to keep up with that, medically speaking, right? Am I
Well,
misunderstanding that?
that's why I think this is kind of interesting, and I'm not going to go into the details of what's different about RNA or mRNA, because I frankly am not, you know, that deep into biotech. But, you know, just from what I can glean in a totally layman's understanding, it looks like this is a really different way to approach dealing with viruses. And so it may be something that uh, the mutation of viruses is not as much of a factor as it has been in previous vaccine formulations.
I've been seeing the same.
It's been my understanding. Hang on, big guy, hang on. It's been my understanding that they had a head start with this because of SARS. So that was my understanding. So that's one of the reasons why it went, you know, they had gone so quickly to the point that now there's a vaccine, because they had already had a lot of research and a lot of data because of how closely related it is. Dude, I've been waiting for 10 minutes. I've been waiting for 10 minutes while you just kept going. He can wait a couple of minutes. No, but I'm done now.
So what I've seen makes me wonder that if they've actually come up with the cure for the common cold, which has been like the pipe dream of doctors since the beginning of doctors. But if they're going to make a vaccine for a coronavirus through mRNA, and it's only attacking the spikes on the outside and teaching our white blood cells how to attack that, if we all got the vaccine worldwide for a couple of seasons, and we kept up on boosters, we could get rid of everything that is encapsulated in a coronavirus. And it wouldn't matter what was mutating on the inside. If it had a coronavirus shell, we're immunized against it.
Um, Only about 25% of the common colds a year are from a coronavirus. So
There is a doctor out there. I believe I heard him interviewed by Sam Harris on the Waking Up podcast or Making Sense podcast. But he was talking about how he was theorizing that SARS, the common cold, and COVID are all coming from the same sort of historical trend from the 1918 pandemic, that was actually a coronavirus and not the flu, and the common cold is the result of our becoming accustomed to having that particular strain of coronavirus until it became so really benign to us that it is the common cold. And that kind of creates this through line from, the 1918 to the common cold to SARS to the current, COVID. Of course, that's all theoretical, and I don't know too much about that particular doctor.
A large percentage of the common colds that people catch every year are actually rhinovirus. Like I said, only about 25%. The common cold isn't an actual illness. It's a catch-all term that we use for a bunch of different ones. That's why rhinovirus is a cold, the coronavirus is a cold. And we also have known that for a long time. If any bottle of Lysol that you buy in the last 30 years says right on the front of it, kills 99% of coronaviruses. So,
Holy shit! I don't know, but I feel like something like a spider was on my toe. I'm so.
Oh my God.
I don't know. There was just like a weird, creepy, crawly feeling over my toe. I'm so sorry. I apparently I pulled my camera went somewhere. I don't know. I'm so sorry. That was really strange and creepy, and I don't know. I mean, if there was, I think I must have kicked it someplace or crushed it or.
I'm going to go back to this
behind my
stream
monitor.
and clip out your little section of video where the camera is falling, and I'm going to turn that into a GIF.
Oh my God, so much stuff. Okay, can you read it?
Speaking only for myself, I mean, I will get vaccinated as soon as I physically can. I don't know what vaccine will be available to me, or what, and it probably won't be until at least April or later. I can't remember if it was Jack or Rob or whoever, maybe, I can't remember, someone else other than me said, the reason it might happen slowly is because it's here. And, I mean, even if Trump hadn't been hampering the process, which is clear that he's doing, and that's a whole different conversation, which we may or may not want to have. But I mean, the bottom line is the logistical difficulties of inoculating 100 million or 150 million or whatever people is the ultimate goal of this. What, 200 million people, I suppose, would be 67%. So, yeah, if you could inoculate 2/3 of the people, you'd have pretty good. What herd immunity really means is most people are inoculated. Herd immunity doesn't mean most people get sick. Like that's what's been bandied about in the press for the past few months, and that's just the complete misunderstanding of what herd immunity actually means.
I mean, I do want to say that I'm not saying that I won't ever take it.
I don't wait for longer to take the vaccine if it wasn't for the fact that I want to travel. And I worry that it might be.
If you take the vaccine, they let you travel?
Well, I think you can travel anyway, depending on your
Yeah, if you can afford to quarantine.
But having said that, if you have the vaccine, I think traveling might be an awful lot easier. And I'll put it to you another way. I envisage a time in the near future where you can't get unless you've been vaccinated.
Where you can't do what?
Where you can't get on a plane unless you've been vaccinated, unless you can show proof.
Oh, yeah.
Vaccination.
You had said can't get sick unless you got vaccinated.
That might be the case.
At least internationally.
I mean, I would
You might actually not check for vaccination records, but internationally, I could see it.
Yeah. I totally could.
Well, I mean, the airline industry themselves could have it so you couldn't get on the plane. I mean, they own the airplane.
Yeah,
They can put any requirement.
The
They
thing
may
is that
put
right now,
requirements on it, but they need the money.
I mean, right now, though, well, at least in America, and I think several other, similar first world countries, you can not get vaccinated based on religious exemptions. So if how do you handle that in a commercial setting without violating somebody's rights?
Sneak into their house in the middle of the night.
But
I,
which is okay to do as long as you don't torture them, right?
Right. Duh.
Man, I'm gonna be
We-
super angry if that's a thing, dude. I'll have to highly reconsider my risk assessment. I'll have to reconsider that if travel is suddenly put on the table.
another thing that
for me, it's a real issue. This year, since I came back on the 1st of July, I've driven like 5,000 miles or something like that just to travel because we don't want to fly. And right at the moment, even driving doesn't seem safe. So right now I was supposed to be in St. Louis. It's supposed to be my last weekend in St. Louis before coming back for Christmas. But we didn't go because the country's on fire with coronavirus right now. And I think, if you're going to talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk. And I really think people need to be responsible, and that starts with me. So that's why I'm staying home, except for once or twice a week we go out for supplies. But other than that, I stay home and I do the thing, and I'm just as sick of it as everybody else is. You know what I mean? But to me, it's a small price to pay. It's give up a little bit now for a better tomorrow seems to me like a fair price to pay, rather than make tomorrow be shit for an awfully lot longer before it ever gets better, which is the way it's been going. I mean, the way things have happened in America. When I moved here on the 1st of July, there was 2.75 million confirmed cases of coronavirus. Now there's like 16 million, and it's 6 months later, not even 6 months later, And when I moved to Colorado, the map that has like the yellow states and the orange states and the red states and the dark red states, Colorado was like the light orange. Now we're deep red. You know what I mean? And so
every state is deep red except for Hawaii.
Well, I mean, a lot more states are deep red. For a long time, it was just California, Texas, Florida, and New York. But now,
no, I saw that map the other day. Every single 49 out of 50 of the states are deep red.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the things that I think doesn't work is America needs to always individualize every problem. Everything is a matter of, whether it's recycling as a way of curing climate change or everything else. It all comes down to individual actors. And the problem is, it's really difficult to get individuals to universally act that way. That's why we're in this situation. And so it almost doesn't matter that you've spent 6 months, and many, many, many millions of Americans have spent 6, 8, 10 months, cloistered in their homes, being very, very careful, because the one or two churches that have a super spreader event, counter that almost immediately. One anti-masker who goes around through the grocery store deliberately, yelling in people's faces, is enough to counteract the efforts of an entire community who's been working really hard to not spread the coronavirus. So we're in a really difficult pickle that we're still going to be in when we get to the point where vaccines are available and there are people who, will refuse to take the vaccine. If that's more than 35% of people, then we're going to be in a situation that we don't reach herd immunity. We just continue to be in this cycle where people are getting sick and dying, and we almost can't get out of it until we have at least the smallest shred of, collectivist approach to it. And I don't mean we go, full socialist or communist, but Americans don't see themselves as being in this together, at least not on anything like a universal level, because we're these infighting tribes that are engaging in a culture war. And there's various different groups with various different interests. Some of them seem to really want as many people to get sick as possible. I've seen it in my Facebook feed, people who have memes to counter every, trying to get as few people to wear masks as possible and stuff like that. Like, I don't know how we get out of this cycle that we're in.
Yeah, alongside that, there were parties where people were trying to catch it from each other. You know, they're deliberately trying to head for the herd immunity the other way by spreading it as far as they can, so that they can try to get back to the world that they wanted. And ironically, if everyone had just shut down diligently for 2-3 weeks, we'd be okay right now. And instead, raging pandemic, and we're 49 out of 50 states red.
Right, and that's the thing I've mentioned in previous streams, that it's only 56 days that are needed to totally kill. Like, if you could somehow shut down everything for 56 days, less than 2 months, the coronavirus simply could not spread to another person before it died off. Like, we could theoretically, physically kill the virus forever if we could just not spread it for 56 days.
What does
But
deep
that,
red mean?
sorry?
What does deep red mean? A deep red state? What does that mean?
Deep red is referring to the transmissibility and the spread of the virus. It's not the political red, as red states that way.
I thought we were talking about the red in terms of the percentage of positivity of coronavirus in that area. Like in
Yeah.
Boulder right now, it's 20% or something like that.
Okay, I'm on the same page now. I just
Yeah.
did not
There's this
have that initial
number that I'm sure everybody's heard of, which is the R naught number. And R naught is, if it's below 1, then that means that the virus is spreading to less than 1 person per individual infected. And that's what you want. In order to end the pandemic, we have to get the R naught below 1. And currently, if we're up around 1.5 or 2 or even 2.5 in the worst areas, that means 2.5 people are being infected for every 1 person currently infected. And as long as we're doing that, like, that's nearly exponential, unchecked spread. And it really doesn't seem like anyone has a way of totally stopping that. Even, sorry to keep talking so long, but I have one more quick point. The Trump administration, who put every single chip, the whole pile of gambling chips on vaccines, that was their one solution that they're going to try and do. They still screwed up the negotiations with Pfizer when, Pfizer asked them, do you want to secure this next batch of, they promised, I think it's a 50 million batch delivery for the first wave. And they said, we're going to offer you for free. You don't have to pay for it until it's proven that it works and it's been distributed. Here's another batch that you can get, after the first one. And the Trump administration dawdled on this, and therefore, the window expired and other countries jumped in and wanted that second batch. So now we are going to be, waiting until potentially July before we have that next batch come in from Pfizer. So we're not only not doing any of the basic things of masking up and just being very careful to keep distance and not do gatherings, but we aren't even going to do the vaccine correctly. And if the vaccine expires, the Pfizer vaccine only has a few days of shelf life, and it's 2 doses, so people have to come back for a second dose. I can see us getting into the same kind of cycle we are with masks and with social or physical distancing.
Oh, just
Paul,
the
Paul, to add to
situation.
your airplane thing, I actually think we're going to get to the point where we can't allow children to go to school without vaccinations. This has happened with certain vaccinations before, but I think the argument will come about and popularize it such that we're going to have widespread schools not allowing children who aren't vaccinated to go to school, because it's not just a risk for the children in the school; it's a risk to those children to be at the school, and they don't want that liability. And of course, because it's me, you know that there's a joke coming, right, Paul?
Go on.
You know why I like jokes about children who don't get vaccines?
Go on.
They never get old.
Oh.
I- I-
Don't you have to have shots to go to school as a kid?
Same joke, and yeah.
You have to have shots to go to school as a kid, right? Like you have to get your flu shots and a whole series of things to go to school. At least,
Yeah, particularly polio and rubella.
yes. I'm like, I definitely have, the vaccine shots and tuberculosis and all of those things, and I thought you literally had to have those to your, I guess I seem to recall when I was young that my parents maybe had to turn in a health card of some sort to demonstrate that you had these things given to you before they would allow you to come to class.
That's
So
the way it was in the 80s.
Yeah.
My parents signed a permission slip, and the school gave them to me. Like, I went to the school nurse's office, got in line, and they gave me the shots at the school.
Yeah. I think that those protections have kind of been weakened over the years. And I don't have any kids, so I don't have any children in school, so I'm not, up on it. But my understanding is the concrete sort of, hard line in the sand that children have to be vaccinated to be in public school is not as concrete and hard line as it used to be.
Especially in the red states.
I was just going to say that depends on where you are. Yeah, I know here in New Jersey, you have to be vaccinated to be in school.
I feel like I don't know, this kind of medicine is an interesting I guess interesting ethical conversations that go on around it with regards to people that would do things like not have their kids get certain medical, because the child has no choice, right? The child has to do whatever their parent wants. And oftentimes people's beliefs about these things are in fact religiously based in, whatever it is that they believe, similar to not being blood transfusions, Jehovah's Witness. I think Amish people don't allow things like that either. And I find it fascinating because, well, one, you would think that if you could do something to improve someone's life, right, that you would do that. And I guess that, so I've seen cases, I've read cases where the argument is that by not doing this to your children, like it's okay for you to make the choice as a adult that can decide you don't want to have a blood transfusion or whatever. But in the case of children, where they cannot do that, and then they are being subject to someone else's religious beliefs, and they're not even old enough to, make up their own mind about what those are because they just have no worldly experience or context, that it's actually been argued as negligent parental behavior and therefore actionable for the courts to step in and give the child the medical care. Because
in cases of Christian Science, that's true, where parents have allowed their children to die of preventable diseases, the
Yes.
court has then fined or even given jail time to parents for negligent, I think negligent manslaughter or child abuse, something along
Yes.
those lines. There's
Yeah.
definitely been a few cases.
Well, I'm reticent to talk about my own experience with this. Rob will remember on the original Breakfast Club channel, I made a video talking about this subject of my own experience as a response to something Steve Shives had said in a video. I'm not sure if it was on his own channel or on the Breakfast Club. And I am, generally speaking, when Rob first deleted the Breakfast Club, I was a bit sore. But that video is one of the ones I'm glad doesn't exist anymore. And it's something I'd really rather not talk about in any great length, other than to say, I'll be blunt, okay? When my kids were little, I had just moved to the UK before my kids were born, and we immunized my kids homeopathically. And at the time, I had never heard of homeopathy, and it was something my wife was really into. And her older two sisters also immunized their children homeopathically. And I just sort of had the idea that it was another way that they did things over here in the old UK. And hey, I didn't know, I literally didn't know more about it. They explained to me the philosophy of homeopathy, which is, you use these things to make your antibodies stronger, and having stronger antibodies will make you more disease resistant. That's the whole, that's it in a nutshell. I could go into it, but that's it in a nutshell. And so for me, it wasn't religious. It was ignorance on my part. I can tell you for sure that if my kids were born over here and raised over here, we would have got them vaccinated and it wouldn't have been a thing. I mean, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. But because my wife, and not only that, but that whole side of the family was doing it homeopathically, I just thought that's how they do it here. And it was years later, many years later, that I found out that homeopathy isn't really a thing, And so you can imagine how that makes me feel. Now, my daughter's traveled the world. She's been to more than 50 countries. She's never had a vaccination. As far as I'm concerned, that's just,
I would be scared to do that.
to me, it's just lucky, But she's a woman. She's in charge of her own mind, and I'm not in charge of her mind. And she knows how I feel. I've made that clear. And that's the best that I can do as dad. You know what I mean? You can't raise a child to think for themselves and then blame them when they do,
Paul, don't feel bad about pseudoscience getting to you all the way over in the UK, because it's gotten to me where I'm in grad school, and some of the people I'm going to graduate with in May have some beliefs to them that are completely not evidence-based. Some of them believe in looking at auras. Some of them believe in using Reiki, and they're going to be just as credentialed as I am for evidence-based practice, but still have these beliefs that these pseudoscience things work.
I feel like you need to show them that comedy video by JP Sears on YouTube. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a comedian. But he does a video where he's talking about he's talking about alternative medicine, and I think one of my favorite lines out of that is something along the lines of, "I really love my aromatherapy. The lavender scents just work so good, especially when I take them with a couple of aspirin." And it's like, the point is, if that doesn't drive the point home for you, then I don't know what does, right?
I think it was Tim Minchin has that one line. There's a word for alternative medicine that's been proven to work. Medicine.
Yeah. I really feel like sometimes I get put in a position where if I call these things out as harshly as I would want to, I will be then charged with being not culturally informed, and basically become a pariah for trying to champion science, because I'm shitting on people's cultural beliefs and their religious beliefs.
It does not matter if your belief is cultural or religious. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it. Oh God! Listening to what you're saying makes me so mad.
Makes me mad too. I've had a very hard time with it, and all I come back to is for all that they're going to do in the world that's ineffective, I'm going to get a lot more clients than them because I'm going to have a really good track record of using evidence-based practice and actually doing good in the world.
And getting real results. How about that?
Yeah.
I mean, in general, the way I see it is no matter what field a person is working in or what they're doing with their life, if their beliefs help them and doesn't interfere with their job, especially if their job is helping other people, I don't give a shit what they believe. Have at it. I personally think that they're, basket full of rats crazy, but whatever, they're allowed to be.
So I find this whole thing interesting, like pseudoscience, pseudo medicine, alternative medicine, whatever you want to call it. Because so I basically deal and operate in the realms of all of those things with people that of like full on believe all Reiki is real and auras are real and all of this stuff, telepathy and psychic things and whatever. It's all real,
And
right?
fairies.
And what?
And fairies.
You should talk to me about that sometime if you want to know what I actually believe. And then we'll see what you think of where I stand on things, because I don't believe in supernatural beings, including fairies. So, but the thing that disturbs me about it, right, is so for me, it is okay for somebody to say, I believe that ghosts exist, or I believe that aromatherapy does a good thing, and maybe even in a sense of what do you call the little water pills? Fake pills, and you take them.
Placebo.
Thank you, placebos. Like even in a placebo sense, that it is doing them some kind of good on a psychological level, if not, a physical level, right? And maybe that's an actual thing, right? I mean, we've measured placebos, we know that happens, so we can say perhaps other things happen too. However, I dislike what pseudoscience does with the mangling and the garbling of words and definitions in order to try to make themselves sound more factual,
Credible.
yes, credible. This whole quantum physics thing, right? Like the super essential, like quantum physics, everything is made of energy, and therefore all of these other things. But the word energy in and of itself in a scientific setting is nothing like how any of us uses it every single day colloquially. Nothing at all. Like it's actual, what energy is defined as. Its scientific definition is nothing like that. And what'd you say?
The ability to do work.
He says, sorry, our scientist in the background here says it's the ability to do work. This is what energy is. And he's, okay, they can hear me talking. So, but yeah, so I feel like the real crime here is not believing that maybe there are things happening that we don't understand, because that's basically the premise of all science ever, right? Why is this thing happening? I don't know. Let us try to solve the problem. So that's fine, right? What gets me is when these people purposefully hijack these words, and then people that don't know better are detrimented by that. I feel like that is almost criminal, to purposefully do that, or to purposefully remain ignorant or misuse these things in such a way that you then turn it around to others, and it makes them make bad decisions for themselves out of pure ignorance, or at least what initially started as that.
As a veteran,
Yeah, it's a type of
persecutor
fraud.
of religious people, as an anti-theist for years, I can tell you what got me to the point where I let go of that just a little bit. In that, what I see in religion is like a continuum of the way that people understand the world. And I do believe that science replaced religion as a better way of understanding the world, right? Some people are still stuck on that religion thing, but that's how they understand the world. So when they start using words from science, they're just trying to understand their world in a world where science is making their worldview look really bad all the time.
Well, I think there's two different groups of people, because I think what Sister Danger might be talking about are like the people who make the documentary, like What the Bleep Do We Know or The Secret, where, those are folks who are using the terminology specifically to kind of cover up or distract from the thing that they're selling, or the lack of credibility the thing they're selling has. And I've had my particular frustration with Michio Kaku, the you know uh quantum physicist who's occasionally lended his name and voice and thoughts to a lot of these documentaries. But I think that ultimately it sort of showed that Michio Kaku was kind of um, he wasn't given the full information in these documentaries when he was a part of them. That he's asked to talk about quantum physics, and then through the magic of editing and the presentation, What the Bleep Do We Know sort of presents it like, oh, look, this famous theoretical physicist or quantum physicist backs up our understanding of quantum physics, and we're using the language that Michio Kaku has sort of given us so that we can sell you some idea that is beneficial to us financially. And that's very different.
That's the typical trick of new age stuff in general, is they'll take either stuff that's scientific or they'll take stuff from ancient philosophy like Hinduism or some other ancient philosophy like Taoism or whatever. And they'll basically repackage it to make it, but it's yeah.
I find it fraudulent and almost like a psychological abuse, in the same way that I find selling the story of God and and dogmatic religion exactly the same thing. You are intellectually stumping people by convincing them that this is the thing, and muddling ideas in their head such that they can't even extrapolate facts for themselves.
Ancient aliens.
I love watching that guy.
That's different from what I think Michael's talking about. Michael's talking about the average sort of lay person, religious person who is struggling to put together, a theory of how the world works for themselves. And that's not coming from the same kind of place of like, a person who is intentionally committing some type of fraud in order to enrich themselves. It's somebody who is accidentally incorporating fraudulent ideas into a worldview to explain to themselves.
There's the Ray Comforts of the world. That's a whole breed all unto themselves. Then there's your mom, who just believes, because to her that's how the world makes
your
sense.
Mom.
Your mom's mom.
And I mean that's when I was running for office. The other side, the Republicans, scoured my Facebook. Not that didn't take them a whole lot of work to find stuff to use against me, but they pulled my atheist stuff out, and they went after that. They were like, they're going to attack me on my not being religious, and they said that I was an anti-Semite, and that I was anti-Christian. And I wrote a press release addressing their concerns. And for the rest of the race, there was not another word out of them as far as religion. I effectively shut them the fuck up. And basically what I had said was, my parents are Christian. I was raised a Christian. Just because I don't believe in the text doesn't mean I'm anti-Christian. I'm not anti my parents. But yeah, I mean, it's just people believe quite often because, the world makes sense to them that way because it's comfortable, because the people around them do. I don't begrudge people for that.
Neither do I. I personally, I think that people believe whatever they want to believe, and if you value evidence and science, then that's the direction your beliefs are going to go. And if you value what you feel inside, it's more important. And I think human beings are basically born with this sense that there's this feeling, the sense of the numinous. You know, there's something greater. There's something, you know, and there's like a secret that we haven't figured out. And I think we just have this feeling, you know, and maybe that's part of intelligence. Maybe that's just a factor of intelligence that it makes you want to discover new things and learn new things. And maybe that's just a factor of our intelligence, but it expresses itself in this particular way to, you know, 90 some odd percent of the people in the world.
You know, I find myself though, so you say you don't begrudge them the thing. And I guess that I feel divided on that a little bit. Like, in principle, I don't begrudge anybody believing what they believe as a general statement. Unfortunately, what people believe tends to have influence over their actions, and when the actions that are resultant from their belief system are oppressive to another, you know, to me or to a class of people or whatever, then I now find like, how do you not begrudge them their beliefs, because that is how they are justifying the actions that
begrudge them the expression of their beliefs. I don't begrudge them having their own way of thinking. I just begrudge them affecting people in an adverse way. What are you going to say, Rob?
Well, basically, like, for instance, my mom is a Catholic. Her belief and her being a Catholic and her personally, you know, believing in God and following her faith, her way, has nothing to do with the things that the Catholic Church overall does in the world.
But she votes.
But she doesn't vote. She's a Democrat. She's pro-life, pro-gay marriage, but she's still a Catholic. So just saying because she's a Catholic, she must be all of these things that the Catholic Church is wrong, because the Church in and of itself is its own entity.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
And the members of the faith aren't all blind sheep who all do the same thing because the Church tells them that's what they should do. That's why the right wing right now, the last couple of weeks at the very minimum, has been attacking Joe Biden, saying that, you know, allowing Biden to become president would be an insult to God because he's not really a Catholic, even though he's a Catholic.
How do you even define that? Like, you don't really believe. How
Well, I mean, it's the same thing that Brock. Yeah, it's the same thing that Brock was saying in the chat before.
Like,
you know, you don't believe the same thing I do. Right. You know, so they think you should believe a certain way or vote a certain way based on your faith. If you don't follow that, then, you know, it's the no true Scotsman fallacy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
You know, but you know, my mom's a Catholic. As far as she is concerned, she is a good Catholic, even though she hasn't been to church in like forever. You know, but as far as she's concerned, and you know what? She's not hurting nobody.
Even
and I think most people, that's the case. They're not hurting anybody.
Even outside of religious and pseudoscience beliefs that other therapists might have, I've been following in Facebook a group called How to Be an Effective Therapist, right? And one of the biggest fights they will have almost every month or two is, can you be a therapist and be a Republican? Or be a Trump supporter, right? And half the people in there think, no, if you don't believe in social justice to your core, you're going to suck as being a therapist. And the other, like,
do you know what the word objective means? I mean, I'm not saying anybody's perfectly objective, but that is in fact the thing that is striven for, is it not? Like, you are detached and out here as an objective observer to being a therapist, right? Like, you're not there to input your religious, political, whatever beliefs. You're there to provide like tools and other things.
But I could be wrong because I'm not a therapist, and I'm sorry, Michael, but I kind of want to. Okay, I think, I just think The idea is, in order to be an effective therapist, you have to at least own the concept that social justice is a possible thing that can be achieved, or that we should look for as people. And you can't help someone if you don't believe in justice.
That and people who say we're Trump supporters, were they to come across clients who were particularly diverse, might not get very good care, is what they're alleging. That it's very, very hard for them to put that aside and be objective about things.
Doctor, I've come to talk to you about my homosexuality. Well, you are sick. You should probably be treated with electroshock therapy until dead.
Yeah.
$1,000, please.
Don't we actually still do electroshock therapy?
I understand that electroshock therapy has changed quite a lot. So, not that I know a lot about it, but I know that there is a very modern version of electroshock therapy that is often conflated with what we were doing in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they're not really the same thing, even though they are theoretically doing the same thing. One was a very primitive and a maybe even barbarian approach, and another is a very controlled, refined, data-driven approach that has some long history of therapeutic results and data supporting that. So I'll just put that out there.
Version, you would look up electroconvulsive therapy, not electroshock therapy.
Right. I actually only know
in the chat and put this out there. So psychology is not a science.
There are some who say
I thought it was a soft science.
There's some who say it's a soft science. I did have to pass statistics to get my degree in psychology, and it is very much an evidence-based practice. When people don't let their own biases about their view of the world interfere with their ability to practice psychology. That's the problem, is that when people believe in magic and they believe that part of their therapy should absolutely introduce prayer into the scenario, and introduce like some homeopathy. Here, take this home and use this.
The idea of therapy was to just listen to your client and then build something for them based upon what results they want to achieve in their life, and what their particular paradigm of the world is. I mean, mind you,
there's more to it, but I'm talking about people who bring crystals to work in order to cleanse the air in their office, right? And then they impart that sort of knowledge onto their clients that crystal therapy is a thing.
Yeah, I know.
I went to a therapist a number of years ago because I was going through a hard time, and I only went for one visit, one session, because towards the end of the session she started asking me about my religious beliefs, and I said, yeah, this is no good.
Okay.
So I mean, God has no, should not be factored into this. But yeah.
What happens when so I guess I'm asking you, AOD, when your person, like, so if somebody asked me that, like if a therapist asked me, well, what are your religious beliefs like? I think my response would probably be something to the effect of, what relevance do my religious beliefs have in this conversation? And I'm curious, like, how do therapists take it when that happens? I mean, like when they get questioned about why they're doing the things that they're doing, how do therapists react to that? Is that a bad thing to do in therapy?
We very often explain the rationale behind the modalities that we're using.
Okay, so that's not out of line. I
No.
mean, not that I would care, because I guess if somebody told me in therapy that hypothetically I was paying for as the end user that something I did was out of line, I would tell them that they're fired and find a new therapist. But, it's...
it seems to me like it's a totally appropriate question, because people often talk about their religious beliefs as being core values. And if you want to understand what somebody is struggling with, you also have to understand what their sort of baseline core values are, what worldview or lens that they're using to understand what's wrong with their life. And so I think it'd be totally appropriate for a therapist to ask about religious beliefs, because that is often, one of the most fundamental ways that people are going to approach, how they understand if their life is in good state or, falling apart.
I think if somebody said that to me, that would seem legitimate. I think if somebody was just like, and so what are your religious beliefs? I would be completely suspect. And I would suddenly want to hear what their rationale for asking me a question like that was. Right. Like,
I think it's important to know how people understand the world, but knowing whether or not someone's Catholic tells me nothing about their actual understanding of the world, because there's so many different types of being Catholic.
yeah,
Like
that's true.
Jeb's mom. So if I didn't know by the end of the session what your religious beliefs were without asking directly, I think I'd find a different therapist too. Because by asking other questions, they should be able to infer what the important notions about religion that you have are, as far as how you believe it affects your life.
Well, so I guess that, okay, so as I know, but I decided that I was gonna maybe try to go to therapy recently, right? And see what there was to be seen, because I've not really ever done that before. And I've had people, like friends, people that know me, say, tell me things like that they think, oh, like maybe you're on the Asperger's spectrum, or you behave a lot like this, and maybe sometimes things seem confusing to you because X, Y, or Z, or whatever, right? And I'm like, so finally I got the gumption to do this thing, and I went in just this last week to the doctor. Pretty sure it was this last week, to the doctor. And you have to like fill out a little form so that they can kind of try to classify what type of a therapist you need. I guess you have to fill out a little questionnaire, right? Okay, I'm going somewhere with this, by the way. These questions, so there was a gal, she stood in the room with me to help me as I was filling out this form. I literally asked her about almost everything on that form. I was like, I don't understand this question. Because and so I guess that when somebody says, like, these questions, they didn't make sense to me, not because I don't understand them, but because they were not clear language-wise. The way that these questions could have been understood or interpreted had many different possibilities. So it's like, well, what do they mean when they say X, Y, or Z? Do they mean this or do they mean that? I can't tell from this question. It's not precise enough, right? And so she was there and she just told me what the question is supposed to mean so that I could actually answer it, which was great. But that's how I feel often. Like if a therapist was talking to me, I feel like my constant feedback would be like, well, what do you mean by that question? That it is too vague. It is too broad. And I don't know, like is that a weird thing? I feel like it's almost an insulting thing that I've observed that people find it. Your turn.
How do you feel about blue?
Well,
Is that narrow
you
enough
know.
of a question? Okay. So wait. So I want to address Shadow. I'm sorry, Shadow. Shadow said that nobody fucking cares a couple of times, and that when you're having a crisis, nobody wants to hear it. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to listen. They just want you to shut the fuck up, and that includes family and friends and therapists. Bullshit. Bullshit, Shadow, and that's bullshit, and you know it.
In the chat that says therapy that doesn't point to your creator is completely without calories.
Good therapy light.
I mean, I'm trying to lose some weight over here. Like keto's a thing, so I'm good. I'm good with it.
I saw that he had said that, and I wanted to address it, but then I was like, nah, screw it. I'm gonna get into a ridiculous. I mean, first you have to prove that there's a creator. I mean,
who believes this. In fact, spirituality is listed as a component of many different therapeutic modalities by the original authors.
But
They
But-
say
But that's different.
spirituality is different, I think.
Spirituality is different. I mean, I consider myself to be spiritual.
I understand what you're using that term to mean. They're using the term spirituality to shoehorn in the metaphysical
Religion.
into their theoretical framework. If you read their original works, now many people will just adopt what you're saying as their meaning of spirituality, and everything works smoothly. But it leaves people in the field like Brock. Like imagine Brock with a degree in psychology. It leaves people in the field thinking that they can say other therapists who don't try to get you to go to church if you're not a churchgoer, they suck at what they're doing because they should see right away that you're unchurched and get you connected with some religion in your life because that's going to fix everything.
It's so Scientologist.
They can't see that that's what you're lacking. They're missing this huge, obvious hole in your life.
Yeah.
And that's what I have a problem with in my field.
Right. I mean, it sounds like you're getting to the heart of why some people think of psychology as more of a soft science, because if you can have a field that has 10 or 15 or 20 different modalities that theoretically or at least are acknowledged as all being sort of equally correct, and I don't know that they are, forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn or I don't know what I'm talking about, but it sounds to me like you're talking about that fact that you can have people graduating from your program who believe this one very unscientific approach, and then you are graduating with a very scientific approach. Those two things can't really cohabitate within a field that is considered a hard science in certain ways. And so it sounds like you're looking for some maybe more rigorous set of standards in order to bring psychology into more of a hard science, because there's certainly hard science experiments that are done in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not like Carl Sagan turned astrophysics into a soft science all by himself. Astrophysics itself is still a hard science.
Yep.
Psychology, as compared to other behavioral health fields, is the harder of them, but is not a hard science like physics.
I guess that brings up something else. It's not a hard science like physics in that we don't yet have the equations for behavioral science that we have for the movement of celestial bodies. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a hard science we don't yet know or understand in it. Like this chemical interaction with this group of neurons in this part of the brain has an effect, and that effect may be replicable across all human brains, but we have not yet studied or determined that effect, so we are not aware of that underlying science that might exist. We haven't discovered it yet.
If you were thinking about replicability as the standard by which something is a hard science, your ability to predict what is going to happen, then physics is the leader in that force applied to a mortar shell, with a certain angle, you can tell where it's going to land based on the gravitational force.
That's not how I would define it.
I'd be able to predict where that shell's going to land with pretty good accuracy. But there is science that tells us that 40% of people are afraid of snakes, right?
I mean, I would.
That's not going to give you the ability to predict very well who is afraid of snakes, but if we're just going on the body of knowledge that has been created and the wide variety of things covered, psychology kills it in that respect, because we're still trying to explain all sorts of different facets of human beings, which have a lot of different flavors to them, right?
See, I understand hard science as being something that deals with there's more than one thing going on here first. One is the process by which you come to the conclusions. This is imperative in anything that we would call science. So if you are employing a scientific process in what you're doing, you are at least at some minimum level trying to engage in science, right? Because the scientific process is what makes science science. It isn't just that you're working with the hard physical natural world. It's how you're working with it.
Yeah, it has to be replicable.
Well, so that's what I'm getting at. But that's part of it. But you can still employ certain aspects of the scientific process, right? And obviously, that's why I guess I distinguish things like the behavioral sciences as soft sciences, because what you can't do is that replicability, right? You can't do that, not with the incontrovertibleness of the actual mathematical / physical world. You kind of can only do that by showing an overwhelming body of evidence, right? Which is evidence, but it's a lower form of evidence, if that makes any sense. So it's still important that you come to it through good means, right? And, double blind systems and things like that, like how you're conducting stuff. But you're still coming to a lesser form of evidence at the end, therefore soft science. That's
No.
kind of how I see it. That's how I
So
would.
one of the things that makes it a harder science than these other sciences is that we have to do multivariate analysis of a ton of variables that can affect the same decision in many people, which are unique people, right? It's not
Sure.
like using the same variable from person to person. So there's a ton of variables that we're crunching, and we're still coming out with trends.
Yeah.
These trends might not be something where you can predict 100% of the people when they see the same thing they're going to do or say the same thing
Right.
about.
But your
But
overwhelming body of evidence leads towards this is probably most likely.
so it's not as accurate as
Yeah.
telling where a mortar is going to fall, because there are so many other variables to it.
Okay, so like I quit smoking 3 Scaramucci's ago, just about 3 Scaramucci's ago, and one of the things that I used to help me quit smoking was this medication, which is Wellbutrin. This is it's an antidepressant. So this is isn't like medicine like aspirin is a medicine. This is an antidepressant. It's a different animal. They don't know how it works to quit smoking. They know how it works as far as antidepressant and other things, but why it helps people quit smoking, they don't know. Yet, they prescribed it to me for that purpose, knowing that they don't know how it works. That, to me, is kind of a knock against it being a hard science.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that's
I
what
wanna
I was
know,
sort of getting to earlier.
Nightmares? Sorry,
What?
real quick, do those pills give you nightmares?
No, not me. Other people maybe, not me either. But I stopped taking them, and I still quit smoking, so
Here's
whatever.
the thing about real scientists, okay? We accept when something is not inherently true just because we can understand it. If the science bears out that we're getting a completely different result than what we expected, we go with the science, not our own bias, right? We don't have to understand the mechanism to understand that the results are there and that there is a correlation.
That's sort of what I was getting to earlier, that there is something that hasn't been determined underneath it that is replicable and predictive. Even if you don't necessarily have, how point A leads to point Z, there is somewhere there a bedrock of predictable or predictive science, below it. You
So-
go explain it better.
when we run these multivariate analysis, we have all these different variables. Um, we will see some correlations pop up that we weren't looking for, right? And that's not something that we're going to write that paper on when we're running that study. The next study we do, we're going to be looking at that specifically, like why did that anomaly happen? We don't understand why, but we're going to put our study with that completely in the crosshairs, where we're controlling for as many variables as we can, right? And we still might not understand the underlying mechanism of why that medicine works that way in the brain, but we can see that it's working, right? And you can even
Very clinical.
you can see that in regular medicine with how they were seeing certain similarities between survivors of COVID that were in the ICUs. They were looking through their charts, looking for, well, what's the difference between these survivors and these people that died, you know? And so a lot of good techniques came out of that, just, retroactively. It's not like they understood why right away, but they created different protocols, and now our survivability has become a little bit better because of it.
Yeah, like turning patients on their stomach when they and not intubating them as early and
Yeah.
things like that. There's a whole long list of things that we've learned in the last 6-8 months that improve survivability. And it sounds to me like we're not talking so much about a soft science as we're talking about an early science that it doesn't have the benefits of like celestial bodies, which humanity has been, looking at for 10,000 years and making notes and tracking. It's not something that is as obvious as, bodies in the sky above us. And so it's a science that simply has not built up a stockpile of enough data to make it as clear, accurate, and predictable as some of these much older sciences.
And the subject that we're trying to predict is unique. Each person is unique. It's like changing out your sky for a completely different sky and expecting the same results with each one. Some things are going to hold true, some things are not.
The thing that is interesting, I'm fascinated by psychological studies. I think I've probably brought up a number of them in these previous streams.
You have.
It is sort of an interest, maybe even a hobby of mine, to look at rat studies, to look at the Stanford prison experiments, or Lombardi, or some of these other characters who have put together the rat utopia.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always interested in trying to figure out, like, what do they tell us about our social condition, or what can we use from these studies to give us some insight into the way humans might arrange society in the future. And I think that the thing that I still struggle with, even with all my interest in this, is that I'm still mostly theorizing. When I look at the rat utopia studies, or the mouse utopia, and we talk about the behavioral sink that happened in those studies that allowed thousands of populations of 1,000 plus mice to simply die off instead of continually expanding or continuing on. My ability to map all the various studies that I've been interested in onto humans is limited, because I still have to mostly use inference, my personal bias, some of my own, political theories, and all these other things. we're just so far, it feels like, from the point where I can take, this study on chimpanzees or something like that, and say, well, this will give us some real serious, definite insight into the way humans will operate given this particular environment. I will say that the one thing that it does bring me to is the sense that we are much more mechanical than we probably all believe. Like, in terms of how we operate and make decisions, we are much more likely to be programmable than maybe we would love to imagine. We have much less free will than we'd like to think for ourselves.
I agree with that. As I was mentioned a week or two ago, I'm not sure if you were here at the time, Jack, but I've been watching lately the Scientology documentaries on Netflix with by Leah
Yeah,
Remini.
I marathoned that whole thing.
And one of the things that I personally come away with it, which relates to what you've just been saying, I mean, these people are brainwashed. That's the shorthand for what's happening to these people, but it's actually much more complicated than that sounds, right? I mean, they're literally taught a completely different way of organizing their thoughts, which is alien to the rest of us, And what I've noticed is that to the people who leave the church anyway, their humanity breaks through that. There's, most people are trainable, sure. I think, and some people are probably just desperate to get out, but too afraid to get out. But the people who do get out, their humanity broke through. That they were programmed, but their humanity beat that,
And it's literally every time. Every time somebody gets out of the Church of Scientology, it is because of their humanity, because there was something that occurred that they were just like, I can no longer accept that this is in any way, shape, or form a good, positive, humane way to behave, act, treat, whatever it is.
Right.
Other people, myself, like this is bad. And it's unhealthy. Every single time. I was literally going to ask you what you
Message
thought
for you,
it was.
sir.
Oh my God, what is this?
That is meatballs in a spaghetti squash with a red sauce. Served in the squash.
Wow.
Served in the squash itself.
Okay, well, I'm going to be on mute and eat while you guys talk.
So, wow, that does sound good. Got me hungry. What I notice about brainwashing, as it were, is that the reason why Scientology has so many failures in their brainwashing is because they don't pre-screen. They're trying to convert everyone, right? They're they're targeting certain populations, like actors in Hollywood, in order to be more ubiquitous in society. But other than that, they're not really doing a lot of pre-screening. If you have the money, you can start the process, and that's why they're not as successful. There are programs that will pre-screen people for their ability to have that sort of humanity break through, and they will decline anyone who has that sort of willpower. One of those programs sometimes is local police forces. If they require you to have a psychological exam prior to joining the PD, if they think that you are likely to disobey an order because you think that you have uh, a conscience all of a sudden, if they think that that's likely to happen in the future, they're not going to hire you as a recruit. So they're screening for your ability to stay a drone longer.
Well, Scientology relies on, for the most part anyway, then indoctrinating children. I mean, that's the main shtick with lots of religions, unfortunately. And Scientology makes it into a dark art,
I wouldn't just paint religions with that brush. I would say governments indoctrinate through school, and even the military picks them when they're young. If they can get parents to sign away children at the age of 16, they'll do it. But they for whatever reason they've chosen 18 as the age that a kid can be, shot before, 3 years before they're legally allowed to drink. But they do like to break people down
Voting,
before
right?
they build them back up in the mold that they want. They want to catch them young. They don't take people into the military past the age of 35 because you're set in your ways.
Right. Well, there's another thing that the Department of Defense collaborates with many blockbuster movies to make the military look as awesome as and cool as possible. Everything from Independence Day to the Marvel movies have an agreement with the Department of Defense to allow them to use a bunch of helicopters and jets and any other cool looking equipment that gets used in an Iron Man movie or something, is in part the military making sure that they get people young. They certainly want Captain Marvel to look awesome flying her jet so that little girls and little boys will grow up thinking, hey, I want to get behind the stick on a jet and not think too hard about what the jet's actual purpose is in warfare.
Yeah, dropping bombs for the most part. Listen, guys, I'm starting to flag a little bit here, so I'm going to wrap up the show if that's all right with y'all. Unless you had something more pressing that you needed to get out there, which I'm more than happy to entertain.
Is there?
Well, I mean, I don't have anything pressing. I have a trivial thing.
You have what?
A trivial thing. So I'll let AOD go.
Is that a Sasquatch, a leprechaun, and a fairy all behind you?
So actually, this guy here, this is Oddwin. That's his name. This screen you see behind me was hand painted for me by one of the vendors at a show that I work called Odd Mall. And there's an Odd Mall. It was started by Andy Hop, who is like a con runner in Ohio, and his brother David Hop lives out here. And I have been with ever since David started out here. I've been like with him since the beginning. And so anyway, for some show or whatever, we had an artist and she painted this whole screen. And this is Oddwin, and Oddwin is actually the mascot of Odd Mall. I have another. This is Oddwin. We did a contest one year where we had plain ones made out of gray, and then a bunch of different artists made them all different ways, and they gave me the pink one for probably obvious reasons. Anywho, the leprechaun, because the leprechaun is basically a little leprechaun, and the leprechaun is Ion the Leprechaun from our channel, Faye Productions, and the fairy is basically a little version of me. And when we were done using it for the show, then she didn't need the screen, and David didn't need the screen, and he was just going to throw it out. And I was like, I will take the screen. So I took the screen, and here we are. So yes, it's the Odd Mall mascot, and then a leprechaun and me. Yay. And a fairy castle that you can't see the top of, but and then there's like nothing really in the middle. It's just plain there. So I hung a little whatever. So we've been actually moving the whole house around to make room for the Christmas tree. And then also because Ion, the leprechaun now can stream from the bedroom. So we are putting the one that was behind me used to be his. So we're moving that one back into the bedroom and this one over here to be behind me. And so this is probably going to be my regular backdrop here from now on. And then where over yonder is the living room, and that's where we're going to set up the Christmas tree. And we're changing a lot of things around because of the plans that we have for what we're going to do in 2021 with streaming and shows and other such things. And we're just kind of doing everything in little pieces. So very exciting. Yes, I actually am very excited.
More staying home and streaming, less Rona for all of you.
Actually, it's more going out and streaming. We're planning to try.
Stay safe.
No, we do plan to stay safe. We don't plan to go out like in the public. We plan to go out with a very controlled group, meaning our people that are in our little COVID film crew. Yeah, our little pod. And then what we want to do is actually have kind of a we want to do a boffer tournament, as in boffer fighting tournament, but with only the people that are fighting, because obviously you can't have, you know, audiences and all of the people. So basically taking people in pairs and filming their fights and live streaming them, and just doing that in a little closed thing, and then adding some WWE flair to it. So woo! We want to have, I feel like I have to say that every time I say that word. I'm not going to say it, otherwise I have to woo, but you know, but so we want to have an announcer and all that.
Which word?
Flair. Woo!
Ooh.
Come on, man, Ric Flair, come on. So yes, so that's what we kind of want to start doing towards the end of January, and we've slowly been doing things to ramp in that direction. I've been upgrading a bunch of my equipment so that we can actually go out and be able to, you know, have all the batteries and the electric and the stuff, you know, because I imagine that ultimately, once we have the people signed up that want to participate, I will have to largely do the driving closer to where they are located. And then maybe we'll get all of us together, you know, 10 people maximum or something at a park. And then we'll film their parts. We'll live stream it to our Patreon patrons so that they can see it live. And then we'll edit it down and put the actual finished product up for everybody publicly, like the next day or the next couple days or whatever, and then go from there. Because our buffer people at fairs and festivals and all of our, you know, fighter type people, they got to do nothing last year. No events that they could go to where they could get out there and just, you know, stick jockey with each other. So I was like, well, maybe we need to create something for them, because they're really just included in everything. So there it is. That's ta-da! That's why everything's being shuffled around over here.
I have a real quick thing, which is last week I was interviewed about my marionette building and my history with marionettes, and of course the Cast Iron Carousel Marionette Company and all that. That interview will probably go up next week, either just before or just after next week's Breakfast Club Jamboree. But it's very exciting. I'm very excited about it. And as soon as I have a link to the video, I'm going to share it around, because I think it went really well.
Awesome.
We are doing a New Year event here also on my channel. So if anybody wants to go to our New Year event or to our virtual event, you guys are welcome. I mean, I'm already sent. Guess what? It's after the 10th, and that means that it's time to start doing the cards. Your card will soon be in the mail, Agent. Because you've been giving me so much flack about it.
Still haven't got it.
Well, listen, I can end the broadcast, y'all, because I got to get on. But
All right.
thanks for showing up, everybody. I'm glad y'all are here with my people, and it's always a great. It's never the same twice. So fantastic. Say goodbye to the audience, everybody.